of keeping my head down, of being invisible. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd once commanded courtrooms, dissecting contracts with surgical precision. My name, Serafina Romano, spoken with respect in Boston's legal circles. Now I commanded only pots and pans, and no one here knew my real name. To them, I was simply Sarah, the cook who arrived before dawn and left after the dishes were done. I arranged the lamb with precision that had nothing to do with culinary training and everything to do with old habits. Presentation mattered, whether in a courtroom or on a plate. The muscle memory of excellence refused to die, even after everything else had been stripped away. "Table's ready," Marco announced, poking his head through the kitchen door. He was one of Aurelio's security men, tasked with the mundane job of ensuring the dining room was secure before meals. As if anyone would dare attack Aurelio Kozlov in his own home. I nodded, lifting the tray with steady hands. This was my least favorite part of the job, the moment when I had to enter his space, be seen by him, however briefly. For 4 years, I'd managed to remain a ghost in his household, just another servant in a mansion full of them. The dining room was all dark wood and leather, masculine and austere. Aurelio sat at the head of a table that could seat 20, his broad shoulders draped in a white dress shirt, with the top 4 buttons undone, revealing the strong column of his throat and a glimpse of his defined chest. He was reading something. Always reading, always working. I'd noticed that about him over the years. The other staff whispered about his ruthlessness, his cold calculation, but I saw something else in those late-night meals. A man who carried the weight of an empire alone. I set the plate before him without a word, as was our unspoken arrangement. He barely glanced up, murmuring a distracted, "Thank you," in that deep voice with its faint Russian accent, a remnant of his father's heritage, though Aurelio had been born in Boston. As I turned to leave, my gaze snagged on the document he was studying. Even from across the table, I recognized the layout. A corporate acquisition contract, the kind I used to draft and dissect in my previous life. My previous life, before Rinaldo Ferretti destroyed it. I forced myself to keep walking, to return to the kitchen where I belonged. It wasn't my business. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. Involvement led to disaster. Silence meant survival. But as I scrubbed the roasting pan, my mind wouldn't let go of what I'd seen. The contract had been opened to a specific clause, and something about the wording had triggered an alarm in my brain, the same instinct that had made me one of the best contract attorneys in Boston before my fall from grace. "Sarah, you're scrubbing that pan to death," Maria commented. She was the head of housekeeping, a kind woman in her 50s who'd taken me under her wing when I'd arrived 4 years ago, broken and desperate. I eased my grip on the brush. "Sorry, long day." "They're all long days here." She poured herself a cup of coffee, settling onto a stool. "You ever think about leaving? Getting a job at a normal restaurant where you don't have to cook for Boston's most dangerous man?" The question caught me off guard. Leave? And go where? Do what? My law license had been revoked. My reputation destroyed. No firm would hire me, not after what Rinaldo had done, framing me for embezzlement, planting evidence in my files, using his family's connections to ensure I was disbarred before I could mount a proper defense. The irony was that Rinaldo had been the one stealing from clients. I discovered the discrepancies in his accounts purely by accident. Late one night in the office we'd shared. I should have gone to the Bar Association immediately. Instead, I'd confronted him privately, believing he deserved a chance to explain, to make it right. That trust had cost me everything. "I like it here," I said finally. "It's quiet." Maria studied me with knowing eyes. "You're hiding from something. I've always known that. But Sarah, this isn't living. This is just existing." Before I could respond, Marco appeared in the doorway again. "Boss wants to see you." My heart stuttered. In 4 years, Aurelio had never summoned me. We existed in parallel orbits. He in his world of power and violence, me in my world of pots and pantries. Me? I managed. Yeah, you. Now. I dried my hands on my apron, my pulse accelerating. Had I done something wrong? Was tonight's meal not to his satisfaction? Or worse, had he somehow discovered who I really was, the disgraced attorney living under an assumed name? The walk to the dining room felt like a march to the gallows. Aurelio was still seated, but he'd pushed his plate aside. The contract now occupied his full attention, along with several other documents spread across the polished wood. "You're the cook," he said without looking up. Not a question, but a statement. "Yes, sir." "How long have you worked here?" 4 years, sir." He glanced up then, and I had my first clear view of his face. Aurelio Kozlov was 42, with dark hair silver-threaded at the temples and eyes the color of winter ice. The photographs I'd seen in newspapers before my fall, back when I'd paid attention to such things, hadn't captured the intensity of his presence. This was a man accustomed to absolute control, to being obeyed without question. 4 years, he repeated. "And in those 4 years, have you ever noticed anything unusual about my documents?" The question hung in the air between us. My mind raced. What did he mean? What had he noticed? "I don't look at your documents, sir. I only bring your meals." A slight smile curved his mouth, humorless. "But tonight you looked. I saw your eyes linger on this contract when you served dinner. Why?" I'd been too careless. Let old instincts override caution. "I apologize, sir. It won't happen again." "That's not an answer." He stood, moving around the table with the fluid grace of a predator. "Let me ask you a different question. Do you read English?" "Yes, sir." "Can you understand legal terminology?" My throat constricted. This was dangerous territory. But something in his eyes, not anger, but genuine curiosity, made me answer truthfully. I used to work in a law office before." "Before what?" I hesitated. The truth would expose me completely. But the lie I'd maintained for 4 years suddenly felt exhausting. "Before I was disbarred," I said quietly. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those ice-blue eyes. Interest, perhaps, or calculation. "Disbarred for what offense?" "Embezzlement, but I didn't do it. I was framed." The words tumbled out before I could stop them, 4 years of silence breaking like a dam. I discovered that my fiancé was stealing from clients. When I confronted him, he planted evidence in my files, made it look like I was the one embezzling. His family had connections, judges, prosecutors. I never stood a chance. Aurelio studied me for a long moment. "Your name isn't really Sarah, is it?" "Serafina Romano. I go by Sarah now to avoid complications." "Serafina Romano." He said it slowly, testing the name. "I remember reading about that case 4 years ago. The assistant DA said you'd betrayed your client's trust, stolen nearly $500,000. All lies, but very convincing lies." He returned to his seat, gesturing to the chair beside him. "Sit." I sat, my heart hammering against my ribs. "This contract," Aurelio said, tapping the document with one finger. "Tell me what you saw that caught your attention." This was the moment of decision. I could claim ignorance, retreat back to my kitchen and my silence, or I could speak the truth that had been burning in my lawyer's brain since I'd glimpsed that clause. I pulled the contract closer, scanning the text until I found the section that had triggered my alarm. Here, Clause 17, subsection B. The language appears standard. You're acquiring majority shares in a shipping company, correct? Correct. But this phrase, subject to existing encumbrances and prior obligations, that's boilerplate language designed to protect the seller from liability. Except in this context, Combined with this reference in the appendix to Schedule A, listing all material contracts, it creates a trap. Aurelio leaned forward, his full attention now focused on me. Explain. The lawyer in me, dormant for 4 years, awakened. They're not providing Schedule A with the main contract. See? It says, to be delivered at closing. That means you won't see the list of existing obligations until after you've signed this agreement. And this clause here, Section 23, it states that any discrepancies between the verbal assurances and the written contract shall be resolved in favor of the written document. I was verbally assured the company has no significant debt or obligations. But those verbal assurances are worthless if they deliver a Schedule A at closing that reveals millions in hidden debt or unfavorable contracts. You'd be legally bound to complete the acquisition anyway because you've already agreed to accept existing encumbrances and prior obligations. It's a classic bait and switch, but executed with legal precision. Silence filled the dining room. Aurelio's gaze hadn't left my face, and I could see his mind working, processing what I'd told him. How long did it take you to spot this? He asked finally. About 3 seconds. It's the same structure Ronaldo used to defraud clients. He'd hide toxic assets in schedules that weren't delivered until after signatures were obtained. By then, it was too late to back out without triggering penalty clauses. Ronaldo, that's your ex-fiancé? Ronaldo Ferretti. He works for Marchetti & Stone now, one of the most prestigious firms in Boston. Aurelio's expression hardened. The firm representing the sellers in this acquisition. The revelation hung between us like a physical presence. My ex-fiancé, the man who destroyed my career and my life, was apparently attempting to defraud Aurelio Kozlov using the same tactics he'd perfected 4 years ago. How certain are you about this analysis? Aurelio asked. Absolutely certain. I've seen this playbook before. I lived through its consequences. He stood abruptly, pulling out his phone. Marco, I need Victor and Dimitri in my office immediately, and cancel the signing scheduled for Thursday. He ended the call, then turned back to me. You're coming with me. Sir, That wasn't a request, Serafina. The use of my real name sent a shiver down my spine. I followed him through the mansion to his private office, a room I'd never entered before. It was dominated by a massive desk and walls lined with books, legal texts I noticed, along with works on strategy and warfare. 2 men entered shortly after we did. I recognized them as Aurelio's closest advisors, Victor Sokolov, his consigliere, and Dmitry Volkov, head of security. We have a problem, Aurelio said without preamble. The Martinelli acquisition is a trap. For the next 20 minutes, I explained the contract structure to men who listened with the intensity of those whose survival depended on recognizing threats. I'd forgotten what it felt like to use my legal training, to dissect complex documents and expose hidden dangers. The lawyer I'd been, confident, articulate, precise, emerged from the shadows where I'd buried her. When I finished, Victor was the first to speak. If this is true, we would have lost controlling interest in 3 of our shipping routes within 6 months. The debt load alone would have bankrupted that division. Not bankrupt, I corrected. That's the elegant part. You'd be forced to sell at a loss to cover the obligations. Probably back to the Martinelli family at a fraction of what you paid. They'd effectively steal your investment and reclaim their company. Dimitri's jaw clenched. Who else knows about this contract structure? Only the lawyers who drafted it, I said. And possibly the Martinelli patriarch, if he's sharp enough to understand what his attorneys created. Aurelio had been silent, his gaze fixed on me with unsettling intensity. How would you fix this? The question caught me off guard. Fix it? You identified the problem. What's the solution? I thought quickly, the strategic part of my brain engaging. Demand Schedule A before signing. Insist on a 30-day review period for all disclosed obligations. Add a materiality clause that allows you to walk away if undisclosed debts exceed a certain threshold. And change the language on verbal assurances. Make them part of the binding contract, not subordinate to written terms. Can you draft those amendments? Yes, but no buts. Victor, get Serafina whatever she needs. Laptop, access to our legal database, a secure workspace. Dimitri, I want background on every attorney at Marcetti and Stone, particularly anyone named Ferretti. Sir, I interrupted, I can't practice law. I'm disbarred. Aurelio's smile was cold. You're not practicing law. You're consulting for me privately. There's a difference. This could expose me. If Ronaldo discovers I'm here, then he'll have a very short and unpleasant conversation with me. The menace in Aurelio's voice was unmistakable. You saved me from losing millions, Serafina. Possibly saved my entire operation from a sophisticated attack. That debt will be repaid. I'm not asking what you want. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You're going to work for me as a private legal consultant. You'll be paid accordingly. And you'll be protected. The word protected carried weight. I wasn't sure I wanted. Protection from Aurelio Kozlov came with obligations, with chains that might bind more securely than any prison. But as I looked at the contract spread across his desk, at the trap that had been set for him using the same techniques that had destroyed me, I felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years. Purpose. How long do we have until the scheduled signing? I asked. 48 hours. Then we'd better get started. Victor led me to a small office adjacent to Aurelio's main workspace. It had clearly been unused for some time, but within an hour, it had been transformed. Laptop with encrypted access, printer, legal database login credentials, and a locked file cabinet for sensitive documents. Anything else you need? Victor asked. He was a tall man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Coffee, I said. Strong. And access to Aurelio's complete file on the Martinelli deal. Everything from initial contact to this contract. You'll have it within the hour. He paused at the door. Boss doesn't trust easily. The fact that he's given you this much access after one conversation says something. Says what? That his instincts about you match what I've observed these 4 years. You're loyal, discreet, and you don't ask for things you haven't earned. His expression softened slightly. Welcome to the inner circle, Serafina. It's a dangerous place to be, but safer than being outside it. After he left, I sat at the desk and allowed myself a moment of pure panic. What had I just agreed to? Working for a man whose empire was built on activities I could only guess at, exposing myself to the very person who'd destroyed my career, abandoning the safety of anonymity I'd cultivated for 4 years. But then I thought about that contract, about Ronaldo's smug certainty that his trap would succeed, about 4 years of hiding while he'd prospered, building his career on the foundation of my destroyed reputation. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. The files arrived as promised. I dove into them with the intensity I'd once brought to every case, constructing a timeline of the Martinelli negotiation. The more I read, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't just a simple fraud. It was a sophisticated, multi-layered scheme designed to destroy Aurelio's shipping operations while making it appear to be his own poor business judgment. Around 2 a.m, Aurelio appeared in my doorway holding 2 cups of espresso. The sight of him, dress shirt now even more rumpled, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms, sent an unwelcome flutter through my stomach. Marco told me you refused dinner, he said. I hadn't even noticed the hunger until he mentioned it. I was focused. So I see. He set 1 cup before me, then settled into the chair across from my desk. Walk me through what you've found. For the next hour, we dissected every element of the deal. Aurelio's questions were sharp, incisive. He understood business strategy intuitively, even if legal terminology wasn't his primary language. I found myself explaining not just what I'd discovered, but why, the strategic implications of each hidden clause. "This materiality threshold," he said, tapping one section of my draft amendments. 10 million in undisclosed obligations. Why that number? Because it's high enough to seem reasonable, but low enough to capture the debt I suspect they're hiding. If they balk at this number, it confirms there's something substantially worse in Schedule A. And if they agree to all amendments, then either I'm wrong about the trap or they're playing a longer game than I anticipated. Aurelio's gaze held mine. "You're not wrong. I've learned to trust instinct, and yours is screaming warning. 4 years ago, my instinct told me to trust Ronaldo. I hadn't meant to say it aloud, but exhaustion had loosened my usual guard. 4 years ago you were in love. Love makes people stupid." He sipped his espresso. "Now you're angry. Anger makes people sharp." "I'm not angry," I lied. "You've been hiding in my kitchen for 4 years, using maybe 10% of your capabilities, living like a ghost. That's not healing, Serafina. That's barely surviving. And yes, that's anger. At him. At the system that failed you. At yourself for trusting the wrong man." The accuracy of his assessment stole my breath. "You don't know anything about me. I know that you've worked in my house for 4 years and never once asked for anything beyond your salary. I know that you're brilliant. Those amendments would impress attorneys with 20 years more experience than you had. I know that someone broke you badly enough that you've been hiding ever since." He leaned forward. "And I know that tonight, when you saw a version of the same trap that destroyed you being set for me, you couldn't stay silent. That took courage. It took self-preservation. If Ronaldo is behind this, if he's working for people targeting you, then my hiding here isn't safe anymore anyway." "True. Which is why you're going to stay close to me until this is resolved." "I don't need protection." That wasn't the protection I meant. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "I meant you're going to be involved in negotiations, present at meetings, visible." Horror flooded through me. "No, absolutely not. If Ronaldo sees me, if Ronaldo sees you, he'll know his trap has been discovered. He'll know that I have someone who can dissect his schemes. That's strategic advantage, Serafina. That's also putting a target on my back. The target was already there the moment you recognized his technique in my contract." Aurelio stood, moving to the window that overlooked the mansion's gardens. "But here's what Ronaldo doesn't know. You're not alone anymore. You're not a vulnerable woman he can destroy with planted evidence and corrupt connections. You're under my protection now, and that changes everything." The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed me. Instead, I felt a dangerous flutter of something I refused to name. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "I'm just a cook who happened to spot a problem." He turned from the window, and the intensity in his ice-blue eyes made my breath catch. "No. You're a brilliant attorney who was destroyed by a corrupt system and a vindictive man. You're someone who sees threats others miss, who understands the law with the precision of a surgeon with a scalpel. And tonight, you saved my entire operation from a sophisticated attack. So this is about gratitude? This is about recognizing value, about not wasting talent, because society decided you didn't deserve a second chance." He moved closer, stopping just at the edge of my desk. "I'm giving you that chance, Serafina. Not out of charity, but because I need someone with your skills. Someone I can trust to see the knives before they strike. You don't know if you can trust me. I've had 4 years to observe you. You think I don't notice my own household? You're loyal, discreet, and incorruptible. You could have stolen from me 100 times over these 4 years and never did. You could have sold information about my operations to competitors. You did neither. That's more trustworthy than 90% of people I deal with." The analysis was clinical, but beneath it, I sensed something else. A man who understood loneliness, isolation, the weight of standing alone against enemies who never stopped circling. "The signing is in 48 hours, I said, steering back to safer ground. "When will you present these amendments?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll have Victor deliver them personally to Martinelli's attorneys, with a message that these changes are non-negotiable. They'll push back, probably offer minor concessions to make you think you've won. Then what do?" I stood, moving to the whiteboard on the wall and beginning to sketch out negotiation strategies. "You anticipate every possible response and have a counter-move ready. If they agree too easily, that's suspicious. Means they have another trap we haven't found. If they refuse entirely, that confirms the fraud. The sweet spot is if they negotiate on specific points, while trying to preserve others. That tells us where the real poison is hidden." Aurelio watched me work, and when I glanced at him, there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Respect, certainly, but also something warmer, more personal. "You come alive when you do this," he observed. "This is who you really are, isn't it? Not the cook in my kitchen." "I stopped being an attorney 4 years ago." "No. You stopped practicing law. There's a difference." He moved to stand beside me at the whiteboard. "The question is, do you want to stay hidden forever? Or do you want to reclaim what was taken from you?" The words struck something deep. For 4 years I'd told myself that survival was enough, that keeping my head down, staying invisible, was the smart choice. But standing here, using skills I'd forgotten I possessed, I felt something awakening that I'd thought was dead. "I want my name back," I said quietly. "My reputation. My license. Everything Ronaldo stole. Then help me destroy this deal. And when we're done, we'll destroy Ronaldo Ferretti." The promise in his voice was dark, dangerous. I should have been afraid of it. Instead, I felt a fierce satisfaction that someone finally believed me, finally saw the truth I'd been powerless to prove. "I need to finish these amendments," I said, "and then we need to game out every possible scenario for tomorrow's delivery." Aurelio nodded. "I'll have food sent in. You need to eat." He left, and I returned to my work with renewed focus. By dawn, I had crafted a set of amendments so comprehensive that any attorney reviewing them would understand their client's fraud had been detected. The question was whether Ronaldo would recognize my work, my particular style and precision that had once been my signature. Part of me hoped he would. Part of me wanted him to know that I wasn't dead, wasn't destroyed, wasn't the broken woman he'd left behind. The other part of me understood that recognition meant danger. For me, for Aurelio, for this fragile new purpose I'd found. But as the sun rose over Boston, casting golden light through my office window, I made a decision. I was done hiding, done surviving, done letting fear dictate my life. If Ronaldo wanted a war, he'd have one. And this time, I wouldn't be fighting alone. Victor delivered the amended contract to Marchetti and Stone at precisely 9 a.m. I watched from Aurelio's office as the envelope was handed to a junior associate in the firm's lobby, a young woman who took it with the casual confidence of someone who had no idea what explosive information she was carrying upstairs. "How long before we hear back?" I asked. Aurelio stood at his desk, reviewing other documents with the same methodical attention he brought to everything. "Depends on how quickly they realize what you've done. Could be hours, could be minutes." It was minutes. Victor's phone rang at 9:17. He listened for a moment, his expression revealing nothing, then covered the mouthpiece. "Senior partner wants an immediate meeting. Says there's been a misunderstanding about the terms." "Not a misunderstanding," I said. "A discovery. Tell them we're available at 3 this afternoon. Gives them time to panic and make mistakes." Aurelio's slight smile indicated approval. Victor relayed the information and ended the call. "They're pushing for earlier. Said this afternoon might be too late." "Too late for what?" I moved to the window, looking out at the city where my career had once flourished. That's an interesting choice of words, almost like they're on a deadline. Aurelio joined me at the window. This close, I could smell the subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive with notes of cedar and leather. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that if this is truly a sophisticated fraud, there are probably multiple parties involved. The Martinellis are the face of it, but someone else is pulling strings, someone who needs this deal closed by a specific date. Why? I turned to face him. Because fraud this complex requires coordination, payment schedules, document preparation, shell companies to hide assets. And if I'm right about the structure, there's probably a buyer already lined up to purchase the company back from you at a massive discount once you're drowning in hidden debt. Victor's eyes narrowed. A buyer who's expecting to take possession by a certain date. Exactly. Which means delaying the signing doesn't just give us time. It disrupts their entire timeline and forces them to either abandon the scheme or reveal more of their hand trying to salvage it. Aurelio's gaze was thoughtful. Tell them 3 o'clock is our only availability. If that's too late, they can withdraw from the deal entirely. After Victor left to deliver that message, Aurelio turned to me. You should rest. You've been working since midnight. I'm fine. You're exhausted. He gestured toward a door I hadn't noticed before. There's a private suite through there. It's secure, comfortable. A few hours of sleep will keep your mind sharp for this afternoon. The suggestion was practical, but something about his concern felt personal. Dangerous territory I wasn't ready to navigate. I should review their likely arguments, I protested. Serafina. The way he said my name, soft but commanding, made me look up. You've already anticipated their moves. What you need now is rest. This afternoon will require you to be at your absolute best. He was right, of course. My eyes burned with fatigue, and my concentration was starting to slip. Fine. 2 hours. The suite was more than comfortable. It was luxurious in an understated way that spoke of old money and refined taste. The bed was massive, with linens that felt like silk against my skin. I intended to close my eyes for just a few minutes. I woke to soft knocking. Disoriented, I checked the clock. 1:45. I'd been asleep for over 4 hours. Come in, I called, sitting up and trying to smooth my rumpled clothes. Aurelio entered carrying a garment bag and a tray. You needed the sleep more than you realized. I had Maria bring food and some clothes. The efficiency of it should have annoyed me. Instead, I felt cared for in a way I hadn't experienced since before my fall. Thank you. He set the tray on a small table. Eat. The meeting is in an hour, and you'll want to be prepared. After he left, I found that the garment bag contained a perfectly tailored suit in charcoal gray. Professional, elegant. Nothing like the kitchen uniform I'd worn for 4 years. The label inside was from a boutique I'd once frequented, back when I could afford such things. How had he known my size? But then I remembered his comment about observing his household. Aurelio Kozlov noticed everything. The suit fit perfectly. As I studied my reflection, I barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked like Serafina Romano, attorney at law, not Sarah the cook. When I emerged, Aurelio was waiting in his office with Victor and Dmitri. All 3 men looked up, and something flickered in Aurelio's eyes. Approval, yes, but also something warmer that made my pulse quicken. Good, he said simply. Victor has prepared a briefing on Marchetti and Stone's senior partners. 3 will likely attend this meeting. For the next 30 minutes, we reviewed intelligence that had clearly been gathered with remarkable speed. I learned that the lead partner on the Martinelli deal was Richard Chen, a man known for aggressive tactics and ethical flexibility. His associates included 2 younger attorneys, one of whom was Rinaldo Ferretti. My stomach tightened at seeing his name in the brief, accompanied by a recent photograph. He looked successful, confident, everything I wasn't supposed to be anymore. Will you be able to handle seeing him? Aurelio asked quietly. Yes. I forced my voice to remain steady. He doesn't get to take this from me, too. The meeting was held at a neutral location, a conference room in one of Boston's premier business hotels. Aurelio's security swept the room before we entered, checking for recording devices or other surveillance. Martetti and Stone's delegation arrived precisely at 3. Richard Chen led, followed by a sharp-eyed woman I recognized as Margaret O'Brien, one of the firm's corporate specialists. And behind them, looking as polished and arrogant as ever, was Rinaldo Ferretti. His reaction when he saw me was everything I'd hoped for. The color drained from his face. His step faltered. His carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing shock and something that might have been fear. "Ms. Romano," Richard Chen said smoothly, recovering faster than Rinaldo. "This is unexpected. I wasn't aware you were providing services to Mr. Kozlov." "Private consulting," I replied, my voice calm. "Shall we begin?" We took our seats across from each other. Aurelio sat at the head of the table with me to his right, Victor to his left. The positioning was deliberate. I was being presented as part of his inner circle, not a mere consultant. "Your amendments to the contract are extensive," Chen began, perhaps overly cautious. "Our clients feel they demonstrate a lack of good faith." "Our amendments close loopholes that demonstrate a lack of good faith on your client's part," I countered, "particularly regarding Schedule A and the disclosure of material obligations." Rinaldo finally found his voice. "Those are standard provisions in any acquisition. Ms. Romano, if you were more familiar with current corporate practice..." "I'm intimately familiar with the current practice of hiding toxic assets in schedules delivered at closing," I interrupted. "It's the same technique that's been used to defraud clients for years. Some might even call it a signature move." The implication hung in the air. Rinaldo's jaw tightened, but Chen smoothly intervened. "I assure you there are no hidden assets. However, preparing a complete Schedule A takes time. We're willing to provide a preliminary list within 7 days." "No." Aurelio's voice cut through the negotiation like a blade. "Full disclosure before signing, or there's no deal." "Mr. Kozlov, that's simply not reasonable." "What's not reasonable," I said, "is asking my client to commit millions to an acquisition without full knowledge of what he's actually purchasing. Unless, of course, there's something in Schedule A you'd prefer he not see until it's too late to back out." Margaret O'Brien leaned forward. "I think we all need to take a step back. Perhaps if we could discuss the specific concerns." "The specific concern," Aurelio said, "is that your contract is designed to defraud me. Ms. Romano identified the structure. Either you provide full transparency, or we walk." Rinaldo couldn't seem to stop staring at me. I met his gaze directly, letting him see that I wasn't the broken woman he'd left behind, that I'd survived his betrayal and emerged stronger. "Could we have a moment to confer privately?" Chen asked. 10 minutes, Aurelio agreed. The Martetti team retreated to an adjacent room. Once they were gone, Victor leaned toward me. "You were right. They're panicking. The question is whether they abandon the fraud or try to salvage it," I replied. Aurelio's hand briefly touched my shoulder, a gesture of support that sent warmth through me despite the professional setting. "Whatever they try, we're ready." The Martetti team returned with a new proposal. They'd provide a preliminary Schedule A within 48 hours, with a full version 7 days later. We could review and back out if there were any undisclosed obligations exceeding a certain threshold. It was a trap within a trap. The preliminary version would show minor issues to seem transparent, while the major fraud would be buried in the full version, delivered after Aurelio had already committed to the deal emotionally and financially. "No," I said before Aurelio could respond. "Full disclosure now, or we terminate negotiations." "Ms. Romano," Rinaldo said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "you're being unreasonable. This isn't how corporate transactions work." "This is exactly how they work when one party suspects fraud," I interrupted. And given your particular history with ethical lapses, Mr. Ferretti, I'd think you'd want to avoid any appearance of impropriety. The room went very still. I'd just directly referenced his past, the embezzlement scheme he'd pinned on me, in front of his colleagues, in front of witnesses. Chen's eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Romano. It's a factual observation. Mr. Ferretti and I worked together 4 years ago. I'm simply noting that he has experience with creative contract structures designed to hide problematic information. Ronaldo stood abruptly. I won't sit here and be slandered. Then leave, Aurelio said, his voice dangerously soft. But understand that if you walk out of this room, the deal is dead. And I'll make sure everyone in Boston's legal community knows that Marcetti and Stone couldn't provide basic transparency in a straightforward acquisition. The threat was clear. Aurelio's influence extended far beyond his legitimate businesses. Having him as an enemy would be career-ending for everyone in the room. Chen raised a calming hand. Let's not be hasty. Richard, sit down. Ms. Romano, Mr. Kozlov, perhaps we can find middle ground. If we provided Schedule A within 24 hours instead of 48? Now, I said. You've had weeks to prepare this deal. Schedule A should already exist. If it doesn't, that tells us everything we need to know. A long silence followed. I could see Chen calculating odds, weighing options. Finally, he sighed. I'll need to contact my clients. This is beyond my authority to negotiate. You have 1 hour, Aurelio said. After that, we're done. As the Marchetti team filed out, Ronaldo lingered at the door. Serafina, he said quietly, we should talk. Privately. No, Aurelio said before I could respond. Anything you have to say can be said in front of me. Ronaldo's gaze flickered between us, and I saw understanding dawn. He thought Aurelio and I were involved. The assumption was wrong, but I didn't correct it. Let him wonder. Let him worry. This isn't over, Ronaldo said to me. You're right, I replied. It's just beginning. After he left, Aurelio turned to me. Are you all right? Better than all right. Did you see his face when I called out his ethical lapses? He didn't expect that. You put yourself at risk doing that. If he goes to the Bar Association, claims you're practicing law without a license? I'm not practicing law. I'm consulting. And anything I said in that room is protected as part of your business dealings. I smiled grimly. I know the rules, Aurelio. I may not be able to practice, but I can still use my knowledge to advise you privately. Victor's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then covered the mouthpiece. Our source at Marcetti and Stone says Chen just made 3 urgent calls, 1 to the Martinelli Patriarch, 1 to an unlisted number, and 1 to a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. I looked at Aurelio. The buyer, the one who's supposed to purchase the company back from you at a discount after the hidden debt surface. Can we trace the Cayman number? Already on it, Dmitri said. Should have information within an hour. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Victor brought coffee. I reviewed my notes on the contract, looking for any angle we might have missed. Aurelio made several calls, speaking in rapid Russian to contacts whose purposes I could only guess at. At exactly 4 noon, Chen called. Mr. Kozlov, we've consulted with our clients. They're willing to provide Schedule A, but it will take until tomorrow morning to compile all the information. It was a stalling tactic, but it also meant they were willing to reveal at least some of what they'd been hiding. The question was whether what they revealed would be the truth, or just another layer of lies. 9 a.m. tomorrow, Aurelio said. Your offices. If Schedule A isn't complete and accurate, the deal is dead, and I'll pursue legal action for attempted fraud. After the call ended, I slumped in my chair. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation with Ronaldo was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. You did well, Aurelio said. Seeing him clearly rattled you, but you didn't let it show. He looked good, I admitted. Successful. like the last 4 years have been kind to him while they destroyed me. He looked like a man who just realized his past is about to catch up with him. Aurelio moved to stand beside my chair. You need food? Rest. Real rest, not a few hours stolen between crises. I need to prepare for tomorrow. If they do provide Schedule A, I'll need to review it immediately for hidden traps, which you can do after you eat and sleep. His hand touched my shoulder again, the gesture becoming familiar. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. He was right, but I hesitated. What if they're using this time to cover their tracks? To create a fake Schedule A that looks legitimate? Then we'll catch them at it. Serafina, you've given me the tools to see this fraud. Now trust that we can handle the next steps together. The word together resonated more than it should. For 4 years I'd been alone, handling everything myself because there was no one I could trust. The idea of sharing the burden felt foreign, dangerous, tempting. Dimitri appeared in the doorway. Got something on that Cayman number. The Shell Corporation is owned by a holding company that traces back to the Volpe crime family. Every person in the room went still. The Volpes were rivals to Aurelio's organization, bitter enemies engaged in a decades-long struggle for control of Boston's underworld. This isn't just fraud, Aurelio said quietly. It's an attack. They were using the Martinellis as proxies to destroy my shipping operation, planning to buy it back through shell companies and gain control of my routes. Victor's expression was grim. If they'd succeeded, they could have cut off your supply lines, strangled your legitimate businesses. I felt sick. I'd thought this was just about money, about Ronaldo's usual greed and corruption. But I'd inadvertently stumbled into something much larger, a war between criminal empires, with me caught in the crossfire. You need to pull out, I said to Aurelio. This is too dangerous. Forget the deal. Forget Schedule A. Just walk away. He looked at me with something like amusement. Walk away? After they've tried to destroy me? After they've involved someone under my protection? His gaze intensified. No, Serafina. We don't walk away. We turn this trap back on them. How? A cold smile curved his lips. By making them think they've won. By going through with the signing, accepting whatever poison they put in Schedule A, and then using every legal mechanism you can devise to destroy them with their own fraud. Understanding dawned. You want to let them hang themselves. I want to use their own trap to destroy both the Martinellis and the Volpes, and I want you to design that trap. The weight of what he was asking settled over me. This wasn't just contract law anymore. This was warfare, using legal mechanisms as weapons. People could die if I made mistakes. If I wasn't thorough enough, if I missed something critical. I need time to think, I said, to plan properly. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. He stood. Come. You'll work better after food and rest. The return to the mansion felt surreal. Hours ago, I'd been a cook. Now I was planning legal strategy that could shape the outcome of a war between crime families. Maria had prepared dinner. Nothing fancy, just comfort food that reminded me why I'd found peace in the kitchen for 4 years. Cooking was simple, clear. You followed recipes, used good ingredients, and created something nourishing. Law and warfare were nothing like that. After eating, I returned to my new office and began sketching out possibilities. If we went through with the signing, I'd need to build in escape clauses that wouldn't be obvious until we triggered them. Tripwires in the contract that would spring legal liability back onto the Martinellis and their silent partners. Around midnight, Aurelio appeared with more coffee. You're supposed to be resting. I can't. There are too many variables. Too many ways this could go wrong. He settled into the chair across from my desk. Then talk me through it. Sometimes explaining helps clarify thinking. For the next 2 hours, we worked through scenarios. Aurelio's strategic mind complemented my legal precision. He saw angles I missed, while I found legal frameworks for his tactical ideas. Somewhere in those hours, the dynamic between us shifted. We stopped being employer and consultant, boss and subordinate. We became partners, two minds working in perfect synchronization toward a common goal. "You're brilliant," he said at one point, studying a flowchart I'd created showing how liability would cascade back through the shell corporations to ultimately destroy the Volpe's financial network. "You're not so bad yourself for someone without legal training." His smile was genuine, warm. "I've learned to think strategically. When you grow up in my world, you either develop that skill or you don't survive." "Is that what you want?" I asked impulsively. "Survival? Or is there something more?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you have power, wealth, influence. You could walk away from the violence, the constant warfare, build something legitimate. Something that doesn't require looking over your shoulder every moment." "Could I?" His gaze was distant. "Or would that just make me vulnerable? I didn't choose this life, Serafina. I inherited it when my father died. Walking away would mean abandoning everyone who depends on me, everyone who's loyal to my family. Is that what you do?" I thought about my own choices, fleeing my destroyed career, hiding in his kitchen, abandoning any attempt to reclaim what Ronaldo had stolen. "I walked away," I admitted, "and I've regretted it every day since. But you're not walking away now. You're fighting back. Because you gave me the means to fight, the protection, the resources, the chance." Aurelio leaned forward. "I gave you the opportunity, but the courage to take it? That's all you, Serafina." The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. This close, I could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. He was handsome in a way I'd tried not to notice for 4 years, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his profession. "It's late," I said, breaking the moment before it could become something more. "We both need rest before tomorrow." He stood, but paused at the door. "Serafina, thank you for seeing what no one else saw, for trusting me enough to speak up." After he left, I sat in the quiet office, my heart racing. This was dangerous territory, not just the fraud and the rival crime families, but the growing connection between Aurelio and me. The way his presence made me feel safe, valued, seen. I'd made that mistake once before, trusting a powerful man who'd seemed to offer everything I needed. Ronaldo had destroyed me. What would Aurelio do if I let him too close? But as I finally made my way to the guest suite Aurelio had provided, I couldn't shake the feeling that Aurelio Kozlov was nothing like Ronaldo Ferretti. Where Ronaldo had been charming and superficial, Aurelio was intense and genuine. Where Ronaldo had taken, Aurelio gave. Opportunity, protection, respect. The question was whether I had the courage to trust again, to risk my carefully guarded heart on a man whose world was even more dangerous than the one that had destroyed me before. I fell asleep with no answers, only the certainty that tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. The conference room at Marsetti and Stone was designed to intimidate. All dark wood and leather, with walls lined with photos of the firm's most prestigious victories. I'd been in this room before, 4 years ago, for a meeting that had seemed routine at the time. I hadn't known then that Ronaldo was planting evidence in my files, that he was building a case against me while I sat in this very room, discussing contract clauses with colleagues who would soon testify against me. "You're pale," Aurelio observed as we waited in the lobby. "Second thoughts?" "Memories," I corrected. This firm was where it ended for me, where Ronaldo's fabricated evidence was presented to the partners, where they asked for my resignation before filing a bar complaint. His hand found the small of my back, a gesture of support that sent warmth through me, despite the professional setting. "You're not that person anymore. You're not alone. And this time, you hold all the power." Victor and Dimitri flanked us, their presence a subtle reminder that Aurelio's protection was more than just legal. Chen's assistant appeared promptly at 9, leading us to a different conference room, larger, more formal. The Martinellis were already there. Antonio Martinelli, the patriarch, flanked by his 2 sons, and their attorney team led by Chen. Ronaldo sat at the far end of the table, his expression carefully neutral. But I caught the way his eyes tracked me, the tension in his shoulders. He was afraid. Good. Mr. Kozlov, Ms. Romano, Chen began. Thank you for your patience. We've prepared Schedule A as requested. A document was slid across the table. It was impressive. 73 pages detailing every contract, obligation, and encumbrance associated with the shipping company. At first glance, it appeared comprehensive, transparent. But I'd learned to look beyond first glances. We'll need time to review this, I said, making no move to touch the document. 48 hours minimum. That wasn't our agreement, Antonio Martinelli said. His voice carried the weight of old Boston money and older Boston crime. You demanded full disclosure. We've provided it. Now we proceed with the signing. You've provided a document, Aurelio replied. Verification of its accuracy requires due diligence. Every item is documented, verified, one of the Martinelli sons, Franco, interjected. We've been more than cooperative, given your consultants. He glanced at me. Accusations. The word consultant carried subtle mockery. To them, I was still the disgraced attorney, the woman whose own corruption had ended her career. The irony that they were attempting fraud while maligning my reputation wasn't lost on me. We'll review it here, I said, surprising everyone. Now, before any signatures are exchanged. Chen's expression tightened. That's highly irregular. This document requires expert review, cross-referencing with public records. Then we'll cross-reference. I pulled out my laptop, connecting to the encrypted database Victor had provided. Publicly available records are just that, public. We can verify the material claims right now. For the next 3 hours, I worked through Schedule A with methodical precision. Aurelio and Victor fielded phone calls, using Aurelio's network of contacts to verify information that wasn't in public databases. The Martinellis grew increasingly agitated as we found discrepancies, not the massive fraud I'd expected, but small inaccuracies that raised questions. A contract with a shipping union was dated 6 months earlier than public records showed. A loan obligation was listed at a lower amount than property records indicated. Equipment values didn't match recent appraisals. Individually, these could be errors. Collectively, they formed a pattern. These inconsistencies, I said at noon, suggest Schedule A was prepared hastily, possibly with information that hasn't been updated or verified. Clerical errors, Chen dismissed. Nothing material. Then you won't object to corrections. I slid a list across the table. These items need to be reconciled before we proceed. Antonio Martinelli's face had gone red. This is absurd. We've provided everything you demanded. You've provided a document filled with clerical errors that coincidentally all favor your position, Aurelio interrupted. Either you correct them, or we terminate negotiations. A tense silence followed. Finally, Antonio nodded to Chen, who began making notes about the required corrections. But I noticed Ronaldo whispering urgently to Chen, his expression strained. Perhaps we should take a break, Chen suggested. Allow my team to review these requested corrections. Ensure they're appropriate. 1 hour, Aurelio agreed. As the room cleared for break, Ronaldo caught my arm in the hallway. Serafina, we need to talk. No, we don't. I pulled free from his grip. You're making a mistake, getting involved with Kozlov. Do you have any idea what he is, what he does? Do you have any idea what you do? I countered. The clients you've defrauded, the lives you've destroyed. At least Aurelio doesn't pretend to be something he's not. Aurelio. Ronaldo's laugh was bitter. You're on first-name basis with a crime lord? 4 years ago, you couldn't even jaywalk without anxiety. Now you're working for the Russian mob. I'm working for someone who values my skills, who doesn't steal my work and destroy my reputation when I discover his crimes. His expression hardened. You discovered nothing. I was cleared of those allegations. Because you framed me for your crimes. But we both know the truth, Ronaldo. Every time you stand in front of a mirror, you see a thief and a coward. And what do you see? A whore for the mob? The slap happened before I'd consciously decided to do it. Ronaldo's head snapped to the side, my handprint stark on his cheek. That's for 4 years of my life, I said quietly. 4 years of hiding, of lost career, of believing I was the worthless criminal you made me out to be. Serafina. Aurelio's voice behind me was soft, but deadly. He'd appeared silently, Victor and Dimitri flanking him. Is there a problem? Ronaldo's fear was palpable. No problem. Just clearing up old misunderstandings. I don't think so. Aurelio moved to stand beside me, his presence a shield. I think you're attempting to intimidate someone under my protection. That's a problem. I wasn't. You grabbed her arm. You insulted her. Those are problems. Aurelio's voice remained quiet, which made the threat more terrifying. Touch her again. Speak to her again without her permission, and we'll have a very different conversation. Do you understand? Ronaldo nodded, then fled down the hall. Victor allowed himself a slight smile. He won't forget that soon. But I was trembling, adrenaline and old anger finally catching up with me. Aurelio noticed, his hand gentle on my shoulder. Are you all right? He called me a whore. He called you someone who chooses her own allies instead of being victim to his manipulation. That's not an insult, it's his fear talking. I looked up at Aurelio, at the genuine concern in his ice blue eyes. Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? You're fighting my battle as much as yours. No, I said. This stopped being about the contract the moment I saw Ronaldo's signature on it. This is personal. Understanding flickered in his gaze. Then we'll make sure he understands exactly what he cost himself when he destroyed you. When we reconvened, the Martinellis had agreed to all corrections. Schedule A was updated, printed, and presented for review. This time, the numbers matched public records. Surface level, it appeared legitimate. But I'd learned to look deeper. This contract here, I said, pointing to an agreement with a logistics company. It's listed as a standard service contract, term of 5 years renewable. Correct, Chen confirmed. But the logistics company, Pacific Freight Solutions, doesn't appear in business registries anywhere. No incorporation documents, no tax filings, no public record of existence. Silence. Then Antonio leaned forward, his expression calculating. It's a new venture. Not all paperwork has been filed yet. Or it's a shell company, I countered, designed to hide obligations that will be revealed after closing. This contract obligates the shipping company to exclusive use of Pacific Freight, at rates well above market value. If Pacific Freight is owned by you or your associates, this is a mechanism to siphon profits after the sale. Chen's face had gone pale. That's a serious accusation without evidence. Then provide evidence. Corporation documents for Pacific Freight. Proof it's a legitimate independent entity. We'll need time to gather. No more time, Aurelio said. Either Pacific Freight is legitimate and you prove it now, or this contract comes out of Schedule A. Your choice. The Martinellis huddled with their attorneys. I could see the calculation in Antonio's eyes. How much to reveal? How much to hide? Finally, he nodded to Chen. Pacific Freight will be removed from Schedule A. It was a preliminary arrangement that hadn't been finalized. Victory surged through me. We'd found the trap, or at least one of them. For the next 2 hours, I methodically reviewed every contract, every obligation. I found 3 more shell companies, 2 suspicious loans with terms that would allow creditors to call them due immediately after sale, and 1 environmental lawsuit that had been omitted entirely. Each discovery chipped away at the Martinellis' composure. By 4 p.m., Antonio looked like a man who'd aged a decade in a day. Perhaps, Chen suggested, we should consider postponing the signing. Give everyone time to address these concerns. No, I said. We've identified the problems, removed the fraudulent elements, disclosed the environmental lawsuit, and restructure the suspicious loans. We can have a clean contract by end of business today. That's impossible, Margaret O'Brien protested. The amount of work is possible if you have the documents ready, Aurelio finished, which suggests you knew exactly what you were trying to hide. Antonio Martinelli stood abruptly. I need to speak with my sons, privately. After they left, Victor leaned toward me. They're going to try to salvage this. Question is whether they abandon the fraud or double down. They'll double down, I predicted. The Volpes are behind this. Pulling out means explaining failure to them. Aurelio's expression was grim. Which means they'll try a different approach. What's our next vulnerability? I thought quickly, reviewing everything we'd discussed. The environmental lawsuit. It was mentioned briefly but not detailed. If it's serious enough, it could bankrupt the company regardless of other issues. So we need full disclosure on that suit. And indemnification. If damages exceed a certain amount, the Martinellis remain liable even after the sale. When they returned, Antonio's expression was resolved. We'll provide updated documentation. The shell companies will be removed, the environmental suit fully disclosed. But we need something in return. You're not in a position to negotiate, Aurelio noted. Neither are you. If this deal falls through, you lose access to East Coast shipping routes you've been trying to acquire for years. We both lose. So we compromise. What do you want? I asked. The purchase price reduced by 20% to account for the environmental risk, and we close within 48 hours. I glanced at Aurelio. The price reduction was reasonable given what we'd discovered, but the timeline concerned me. Rushing closing gave them less time to hide additional traps, but also gave us less time to find them. 72 hours, Aurelio countered, and the environmental suit gets its own indemnification clause. If damages exceed 10 million, you remain liable. Antonio considered this, then nodded. Agreed, but the purchase price reduction holds. Fine. As we finalized terms, I noticed Ronaldo watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger anymore, but something closer to regret. Maybe even respect. Let him regret. Let him see what he'd destroyed, and know that I'd survived anyway. The meeting adjourned at 7 p.m., with an agreement to reconvene in 72 hours for final signing. As we prepared to leave, Chen approached me. Ms. Romano, your work today was exceptional. If you ever consider returning to practice, Marchetti and Stone would be interested in discussing. No, I said flatly. I'll never work for this firm again. Understanding flickered in his eyes. He knew about my history, about what had happened in these offices 4 years ago. I understand, though for what it's worth, we handle recruitment differently now. More oversight. 4 years too late for me. In the car back to the mansion, exhaustion crashed over me. I'd been running on adrenaline for hours. Now that it was fading, every muscle ached. You were magnificent, Aurelio said. The way you dissected their scheme, found every hidden trap. I've never seen anything like it. I just did my job. No, you did far more than that. You saved my organization, exposed a conspiracy, and faced down the man who destroyed your career. That's not just a job. That's courage. The praise warmed me more than it should. Ronaldo looked afraid. I've never seen him like that before. He should be afraid. He underestimated you once. He won't make that mistake again. We rode in comfortable silence for a while. Then Aurelio spoke again. The 72 hours until closing. I want you to use them not just to review the contract, but to build a case. Against the Martinellis? Against Ronaldo Ferretti. You said he framed you for embezzlement. I want to know everything. How he did it, where the evidence is, who he paid off. All of it. My heart stuttered. Why? Because part of what they took from you was your name, your reputation, and I'm going to help you get them back. I stared at him, not quite believing what I was hearing. Aurelio, that would require resources, investigators, possibly lawyers willing to challenge a 4-year-old ruling. I have all of those things, and I have you, someone who knows exactly where to look and what questions to ask. His gaze was intense. Let me do this for you, Serafina. Not as payment for your work, but as something you deserve. Justice. Tears pricked my eyes. The first I'd allowed myself to cry since the night I'd fled my destroyed career. Why would you do that for me? Because you saved me first. And because I see you, not the disgraced attorney the world thinks you are, but the brilliant woman who refused to be destroyed. He reached over, his hand covering mine. You deserve your life back. Let me help you reclaim it. For 4 years, I'd believed that chapter was closed, that Serafina Romano, attorney at law, was dead and buried beneath the weight of false accusations and corrupt proceedings. But looking into Aurelio's eyes, seeing his absolute conviction, I felt something long dormant stirring. Hope, anger, determination. All right, I whispered. Let's destroy him. Dimitri's research team worked with a precision that would have impressed any law firm. Within 24 hours, they'd compiled a dossier on Ronaldo Ferretti that was devastating in its comprehensiveness. Bank records showing unexplained deposits coinciding with the dates his clients reported missing funds. Email metadata suggesting deleted correspondence with offshore accounts. And most damaging of all, security footage from our old firm showing Ronaldo accessing my computer late at night. Dates matching when the fabricated evidence appeared in my files. How did you get this? I asked, spreading the documents across my desk. Victor, who delivered the package, smiled slightly. Mr. Kozlov has friends in many places. Some of them remember owing favors. This is incredible. But is it admissible? Most of this would never hold up in court. Who said anything about court? Aurelio appeared in my doorway, leaning against the frame. This isn't about legal proceedings, Serafina. This is about leverage. I looked between him and Victor. I don't understand. Aurelio moved into the room, settling into the chair across from my desk, with that same fluid grace that I'd come to recognize. You can't practice law. Going through official channels would take years, cost a fortune, and still might not succeed, because the system that convicted you once would resist admitting error. Then what good is this evidence? It's good for destroying Ronaldo Ferretti's career, reputation, and freedom, if we want to. His ice blue gaze held mine. But first, I need you to verify it. Tell me if this is enough to prove what he did to you. For the next 3 hours, I worked through the evidence with the methodical precision I'd once brought to every case. The bank records alone showed a pattern of theft spanning 18 months, far longer than the prosecution had alleged in my case. The offshore accounts tied to shell corporations that I could trace back to Ronaldo's family connections, and the security footage was damning. Clear images of him at my workstation, time-stamped at 2 a.m. on dates when I could prove I was elsewhere. This is more than enough, I said finally. This proves he was the one embezzling. It proves he accessed my computer to plant evidence. Combined with my original defense documents, this completely exonerates me. Good. Aurelio stood, moving to look out the window at the Boston skyline. Now, we decide what to do with it. We present it to the Bar Association. We file a motion to vacate my disbarment. We do nothing. He turned to face me. Not yet. First, we use it. Use it how? To make Ronaldo cooperate, to get information about the Volpe family's involvement in the Martinelli deal, to ensure he can never threaten you again. I shook my head slowly. That's blackmail. That's justice. Legal justice failed you, Serafina. Sometimes you need another kind. The kind that operates outside the law? The kind that operates in reality. Ronaldo destroyed your life using connections and corruption that the legal system enabled. You think presenting this evidence will suddenly make that same system admit error? They'll fight you every step. Claim the evidence is inadmissible. Argue that even if Ronaldo was guilty, your disbarment was still justified by appearance of impropriety or some other legal fiction. His words stung because I knew he was right. I'd seen too many cases where truth lost to procedure, where justice yielded to political convenience. What exactly are you proposing? I asked quietly. I'm proposing we confront Ronaldo, show him what we have, make him understand that cooperation is his only path to survival. He gives us everything on the Volpe family's involvement, helps us turn the Martinelli trap back on them, and in exchange, we give him a choice. What choice? He can confess publicly, take responsibility for framing you, plead guilty to embezzlement, accept whatever consequences come. Or he can disappear, leave Boston, leave the legal profession, vanish so completely that no one will ever find him. Either way, you get your name back. I stared at Aurelio, trying to reconcile the man offering me justice with the methods he was proposing. And if he refuses both options? Then we destroy him. Present the evidence to the Bar Association, yes, but also to every client he's ever represented, every judge he's ever appeared before, every journalist in Boston. We don't just prove his guilt. We make him a cautionary tale. The ruthlessness in Aurelio's voice should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something darker, more primal. Satisfaction at the idea of Ronaldo finally facing consequences, of him experiencing even a fraction of the fear and humiliation I'd endured. When do we confront him? I asked. Aurelio's smile was cold. Tonight, before the final contract signing tomorrow. We make sure he understands his position before he's in a room with all of us. Victor arranged it with his usual efficiency. Ronaldo was told that Aurelio wanted a private preliminary meeting to discuss contract details. No lawyers, no witnesses, just the four of us. Aurelio, Victor, Ronaldo, and me. We met in a private dining room of a restaurant Aurelio owned. The space was beautifully appointed but windowless, soundproofed. The kind of place where dangerous conversations happened. Ronaldo arrived exactly on time, his expression wary. He'd brought his own security, a broad-shouldered man who waited outside the room at Victor's insistence. Mr. Kozlov, Ronaldo said, nodding to Aurelio. His gaze slid to me, and I saw the flash of concern in his eyes. I wasn't aware Ms. Romano would be joining us. Sit down, Ferretti. Aurelio's voice carried absolute command. Ronaldo sat across from us, his lawyer's instincts clearly screaming warning. If this is about the contract negotiations, it's about what you did to Serafina 4 years ago. Aurelio slid the dossier across the table. Read it. I watched as Ronaldo opened the folder, his face going progressively paler as he reviewed the evidence. The bank records, the email metadata, the security footage. By the time he reached the images of himself at my computer, his hands were shaking. Where did you get this? He whispered. Does it matter? I asked. You planted evidence in my files. You stole from clients and made me the scapegoat. You destroyed my career to save yours. All of this is true, and you know it. Ronaldo looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Serafina, I can explain. No explanations. Aurelio cut him off. Only choices. You're going to tell us everything about the Volpe family's involvement in the Martinelli deal. Every detail, every contact, every element of their plan. And then you're going to choose. Choose what? Option 1. You confess publicly to framing Serafina. You plead guilty to embezzlement. You cooperate with authorities to clear her name completely. In exchange, we'll recommend leniency. Maybe you serve 5 years instead of 20. Ronaldo's face had gone white. And option 2? You disappear. Leave Boston tonight. Leave the legal profession forever. Change your name if you have to. We give you 24 hours. And then we release this evidence to destroy your reputation so thoroughly that you'll never work in law again anywhere. Those aren't real choices, Ronaldo protested. That's extortion. No, I said quietly. What you did to me was extortion. You stole my career, my reputation, my future. This is just accountability. Ronaldo looked between us, calculation warring with fear in his expression. There's an option 3. I refuse to cooperate, and I take this to the Bar Association myself. Claim you're attempting to blackmail me. With what evidence? Victor asked mildly. This meeting never happened. There's no record of it. And if you try to accuse Mr. Kozlov of blackmail, we'll simply release this dossier anyway, and you'll have all the guilt with none of the negotiating power. I need time to think. No time. Aurelio's voice was steel. The contract signing is tomorrow. Either you give us what we need on the Volpe family tonight, or we walk away from the Martinelli deal and spend our energy destroying you instead. Your choice. Now. The silence stretched. I could see Ronaldo's mind racing, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. Finally, his shoulders slumped. What do you want to know? For the next 2 hours, Ronaldo detailed the conspiracy. The Volpe family had approached the Martinellis 6 months ago with a plan: trap Kozlov in an acquisition that would bankrupt his shipping division, then buy it back through shell companies at a fraction of its value. Ronaldo had been brought in to structure the legal framework, using the same techniques he'd perfected framing me. There are 3 more traps we haven't found yet, he admitted, buried in subsidiary contracts that won't be revealed until after closing. Equipment leases with massive penalties for early termination. A union contract with automatic pay increases triggered by change of ownership. And a lawsuit that's been sealed by a judge the Volpes control. Environmental damages that could exceed $100 million. I felt sick. Even with all our careful review, we'd missed 3 major traps. How do we neutralize them? You can't. Not without walking away from the deal entirely. The contracts are ironclad, drafted specifically to survive the kind of scrutiny you've applied. Ronaldo looked at me with something like respect. Though you came closer than anyone else could have. If it had been any other attorney reviewing this, the Volpes would have succeeded. So we walk away, I said to Aurelio. The risks are too high. But Aurelio was smiling, cold and calculating. No, we go through with the signing. Did you not hear what he just said? The traps will destroy whoever owns the company when they're triggered, which won't be me. Aurelio turned to Ronaldo. You're going to help us restructure this deal. Find a way to close the acquisition but transfer ownership immediately to a shell corporation the Volpes don't control. When their traps spring, they'll destroy their own operation, not mine. Understanding dawned in Ronaldo's eyes. You want to flip the trap back on them. Exactly. Can it be done? Ronaldo thought for a long moment. Maybe. It would require incredibly precise timing, documents filed in the right sequence to exploit gaps in their surveillance. But yes, theoretically possible. Then make it more than theoretical. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to draft the structure, every detail, every filing, every timing sequence. If it works, if the Volpes take the fall for their own trap, then you get option 2. Disappear quietly. Start over somewhere else. And if I refuse, then I give Serafina all this evidence, and she spends the rest of her life making sure you pay for what you did to her. Aurelio's gaze was unwavering. Your choice, Ferretti. Redemption or destruction. Ronaldo looked at me. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I was desperate, scared, and I chose the coward's path. You deserved better. Yes, I said. I did. He nodded, accepting my cold refusal to forgive. I'll draft the structure. Not for him, he gestured at Aurelio, but for you. Because you were right, and I was wrong, and I've spent 4 years knowing it. After Ronaldo left with Victor to begin drafting, Aurelio and I remained in the private dining room. The weight of what we'd just done settled over me. The extortion, the manipulation, the casual use of power to bend someone to our will. You're having second thoughts, Aurelio observed. I'm having all the thoughts. What we did tonight was justice, he finished. Imperfect, morally complicated justice, but justice nonetheless. The law would call it blackmail. The law failed you. Sometimes the law is not enough. He stood, moving to where I sat, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. You think I don't struggle with this? With the choices I make, the lines I cross? But I learned long ago that waiting for systems to deliver justice means waiting forever. Sometimes you have to take it yourself and live with the consequences. Yes, and live with the consequences. His hand touched my face, gentle despite the calluses I could feel. I see those consequences in every mirror, every compromised principle, every moral line crossed. But I also see the people I've protected, the lives I've saved by being willing to do what others won't. His touch sent heat through me that had nothing to do with the argument. I should have pulled away, should have maintained professional distance. Instead, I found myself leaning into his palm, seeking comfort I had no right to want. Serafina, he whispered. My name in his voice was a caress. Tell me to stop. I should have. Every rational part of my brain screamed that getting involved with Aurelio Kozlov was dangerous, foolish, a guaranteed path to more pain. He was a crime lord. I was a disgraced attorney trying to rebuild her life. We existed in different worlds, played by different rules. But when he lowered his mouth to mine, I didn't stop him. I kissed him back with 4 years of loneliness and longing, with gratitude and fear and something deeper I refused to name. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer as the kiss deepened, became something demanding and desperate. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aurelio rested his forehead against mine. This complicates things. Yes, I agreed. Everything about this is complicated. Do you want me to apologize? I thought about it. Thought about how his touch made me feel safe, valued, seen in ways I hadn't experienced since before my fall. No, but I want you to understand. I can't be owned, can't be controlled. If this, I gestured between us, is going to be anything, I need it to be a choice. My choice. Always your choice, he promised. I don't want someone I can control, Serafina. I want you. Strong, brilliant, uncompromising you. The woman who stood up to me in my own dining room. The woman who faced down her nightmare and didn't flinch. I flinched, I admitted. I just didn't let it show. He smiled, the expression transforming his usually stern features. Even better. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. My phone buzzed with a message from Victor. Ferretti is already drafting. Says he might have a workable structure by midnight. We should join them, I said reluctantly. Make sure he doesn't sabotage us. He won't. He wants option 2 too badly. But Aurelio stood, offering me his hand. Though you're right, this is too important to leave to chance. We spent the rest of the night in Aurelio's office, reviewing Rinaldo's work as he drafted a labyrinthine structure of shell companies, timing sequences, and strategic filings. The plan was audacious: acquire the Martinelli Shipping Company as agreed, but immediately transfer operational control to a Cayman corporation that the Volpes didn't control. When their traps were triggered, the liabilities would flow to the Cayman entity, which would declare bankruptcy, leaving the Volpes holding worthless obligations. It's brilliant, I admitted around 3 a.m., studying the flowchart Rinaldo had created. Completely legal, utterly ruthless, and uses their own trap against them perfectly. Assuming the timing works, Rinaldo cautioned, we'll need to file documents in 3 different jurisdictions within a 12-hour window. If any filing is delayed, the whole structure collapses. Then we make sure nothing is delayed, Aurelio said. Victor, coordinate with our people in each jurisdiction. I want redundancies for every filing, backup couriers if electronic systems fail. This has to be perfect. For once, Rinaldo and I were working toward the same goal. He drafted. I reviewed. When I found potential weaknesses, he strengthened them. When he suggested aggressive tactics, I added legal safeguards. It was almost like our early days together, before ambition and fear had corrupted him. You were always the better attorney, he said at one point, the admission clearly difficult. I knew it then. It scared me. So you destroyed me? So I protected myself. Stupid, cowardly, unforgivable. But yes. He met my gaze directly. For what it's worth, I see now what I threw away. You would have made me better. Instead, I made you suffer for my weakness. I wanted to rage at him, to detail every moment of the last 4 years of pain. But exhaustion had stripped away anger, leaving only sad acceptance. You can't undo it, Rinaldo. You can only move forward, make different choices. Starting with this, he tapped the document we'd been perfecting. It's done. Everything you need to protect Kozlov and destroy the Volpes. The final signing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at a neutral attorney's office. We arrived early, Victor and Dmitri conducting one last security sweep, while I reviewed the final documents for any last-minute changes. The Martinellis arrived with their full legal team, but I noticed Antonio looked uneasy. He was a criminal, yes, but a principled one in his own way. The Volpe family's involvement had clearly made him uncomfortable. Mr. Kozlov, Antonio said quietly before we entered the conference room. A word? Aurelio nodded, and the 2 men stepped aside. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw Antonio's expression. Warning, concern, something almost like respect. When Aurelio returned, his face was unreadable. Antonio says the Volpes have people watching the signing. They want to ensure it goes through. Does he know about our counter-trap? No, but he suspects something. Told me to be careful, that the Volpes don't forgive failures. Are you worried? Aurelio's smile was cold. The Volpes should worry. They're about to discover what happens when they target someone who can fight back. The signing itself was anticlimactic, just signatures on documents, witnessed by a bland notary who had no idea of the warfare being waged through legal clauses. But I felt the weight of every signature, every initial. This was it, the moment that would either vindicate everything or destroy us all. As soon as the final documents were signed, Victor began executing the carefully choreographed filing sequence. Documents to the Cayman Corporate Registry, transfer papers to Delaware, operational agreements to Massachusetts. Each filing precisely timed, each one moving us closer to springing our trap. How long until they realize? I asked Aurelio as we waited in his office for confirmation that all filings had been accepted. The Volpes? Maybe a week. They'll wait for their hidden traps to spring, expect to see my operation drowning in obligations. Instead, they'll watch their shell companies collapse under the weight of their own scheme. And the Martinellis? will quietly divest from the Volpes and pretend they knew nothing about it. Antonio's smart enough to read the signs. Victor appeared in the doorway, his expression satisfied. All filings accepted and recorded. It's done. I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. We'd done it. Dismantled a sophisticated fraud, protected Aurelio's operation, and set a trap for his enemies that they would never see coming. "What about Ronaldo?" I asked. "Already gone," Victor reported. "Dimitri saw him to the airport an hour ago. Flight to London, then Prague. We've provided new identification, enough money to start over somewhere quiet. He'll keep his agreement." "And my evidence? My exoneration?" Aurelio moved to his desk, withdrawing a thick legal document. "Filed this morning with the Massachusetts Bar Association. Motion to vacate your disbarment, supported by all the evidence we gathered. Ronaldo's signed confession. Affidavits from witnesses we found. Everything." My hands shook as I took the document. 4 years of my life distilled into legal pleadings and evidence exhibits. 4 years of hiding, of shame, of believing I'd never reclaim who I was. "When will they decide?" I whispered. "The Bar Association has 90 days to respond. But with this evidence, they have no grounds to deny it." He moved to stand before me. "You'll get your license back, Serafina. Your name, your reputation, everything that was stolen from you." Tears pricked my eyes. "Because of you. Because you believed me when no one else did. I believed you because you showed me truth in my own contract. Because you risked everything to save a stranger. That kind of integrity can't be faked." I looked up at him, this dangerous, complicated man who had given me back my life. "What happens now? After the Bar Association rules, after I get my license back?" "That's your choice. You could return to practice, join a prestigious firm, build the career Ronaldo stole, or..." His ice-blue eyes held mine. "Or you could stay with me. Use your skills to help me legitimize my operations. Build something that doesn't require looking over my shoulder every moment. Turn what my father left me into something better." The offer was tempting in ways I couldn't fully articulate. "Aurelio, your world, the violence, the compromises, is the world I inherited, but it doesn't have to be the world I leave behind. You asked me once if I wanted more than survival. Yes, Serafina. I want to build something better. And I want to build it with you." The confession was raw, honest. I saw the vulnerability in his expression, the hope he was afraid to fully voice. "I can't give you an answer right now," I said. "I need time to think, to understand what I really want, not just react to everything that's happened. Take all the time you need, but know this. However long it takes, whatever you decide, I'll be here. Waiting, hoping." He kissed me then, tender rather than demanding, a promise rather than a claim. When we parted, I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. For 4 years I'd been hiding, surviving, just barely holding on. Now, finally, I had the chance to truly live again, to reclaim not just my name, but my future. The question was what future I wanted to build, and with whom. The Massachusetts Bar Association's response came in 73 days, not the full 90. I was having coffee in Aurelio's office, a morning ritual we'd developed over the past 2 months, when Victor arrived with the official envelope. "This is it," he said, setting it before me. My hands trembled as I opened it, Aurelio moving to stand behind my chair, his presence a steadying force. The letter was formal, dense with legal language, but the key phrase jumped out at me. Based on newly discovered evidence demonstrating actual innocence, the Board of Bar Overseers hereby grants the petition to vacate the 2022 disbarment order and reinstates Serafina Romano to full membership in good standing. I read it 3 times, unable to believe the words were real. 4 years of shame, of hiding, of believing I'd never reclaim this part of myself, ended with a single letter. "Congratulations, counselor," Aurelio said softly. The title broke me. I'd thought I was cried out, that I'd shed all the tears I had over those lost years. But hearing counselor in Aurelio's voice unleashed something I'd held locked away. I wept openly, messily, while he held me and Victor discreetly withdrew. When I finally composed myself, I found Aurelio had champagne waiting. I had Victor prepare this a week ago. I knew the answer would be yes. How could you be so sure? Because justice delayed isn't justice denied when someone is fighting for you. And I promised I would fight. We toasted quietly, the moment too profound for elaborate celebration. I was Serafina Romano, attorney at law again. The question was what that meant. "I've been offered 3 positions already," I admitted. The Bar Association publicized the reinstatement, and firms I used to compete with are calling. "Which ones?" "Holbrook and Crane, Silverman Associates, and surprisingly, Marcetti and Stone." Aurelio's eyebrow rose. "Chen's firm? The same firm that terminated you?" "Chen retired last month. New management wants to make a statement about second chances. Ironic, isn't it?" "Are you considering their offers?" I set down my champagne glass. "Honestly, no. Those firms represent the world I thought I wanted 4 years ago, before I learned what really matters." "And what does matter?" I turned to face him fully. Integrity. Justice. Using my skills to actually help people, not just maximize billable hours for wealthy clients who already have every advantage. "Sounds like you've made a decision." "I have. If the offer is still open, I'd like to work for you. Legitimately, helping transition your operations into something legal, sustainable, something you won't have to hide from." Aurelio's smile was slow, genuine. "The offer is always open. But I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. This won't be easy work. I have enemies who won't want to see me go legitimate. Associates who profit from the current structure. It will take years, maybe decades, to fully transform what my father built. I know, but that's the challenge I want. Not drafting contracts for mergers and acquisitions, but using law to actually build something better. Then welcome to Kozlov Enterprises, official legal counsel." He extended his hand formally, though his eyes held warmth that had nothing to do with business. I shook it, sealing the agreement that would define my future. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow. I have 30 contracts that need review, corporate structures that should be reorganized, and at least a dozen ventures that exist in legal gray areas requiring navigation." "Sounds perfect. But today, I want to do something else." "What?" "Visit my old firm, the one where Ronaldo framed me. I want them to see that I survived." Aurelio understood immediately. "I'll have Victor arrange a car." The offices of Brewer and Associates hadn't changed much in 4 years. Same polished marble lobby, same receptionist, though she didn't recognize me. I'd been nobody to her when I worked here, just another junior attorney in sensible suits. "I'm here to see Robert Brewer," I told her. "Tell him Serafina Romano would like a word." Recognition flickered in her eyes. She knew the name now, even if she hadn't before. I'll check if he's available." 5 minutes later, I was shown to the senior partner's office. Robert Brewer was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished. He'd been the one to ask for my resignation 4 years ago, his expression sympathetic, but inflexible. "Ms. Romano," he said, rising from behind his desk. "I heard about your reinstatement. Congratulations." "Thank you. Though I notice you didn't fight for me when Ronaldo's fraud came to light." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't know the full truth then. If I had, you would have done exactly what you did. Protected the firm's reputation, made the problem disappear as quickly as possible, and never looked back." I kept my voice even, factual. I'm not here for an apology, Mr. Brewer. I'm here to tell you that I'm returning to practice. And I'll be working to ensure that what happened to me never happens to another attorney in this city. A noble goal, a necessary one. The system that allowed Ronaldo to destroy me is still in place. Corrupt connections. Rushed proceedings. No real investigation of the evidence. I placed a business card on his desk. I'm now general counsel for Kozlov Enterprises. If you have associates who need a second chance, who've been wrongly accused, send them my way. I'll believe them when no one else does. Brewer studied the card, then looked at me with something like respect. You've changed. You're harder now. I survived being destroyed. That changes a person. For what it's worth, I am sorry. You were a brilliant attorney. You deserved better from us. Yes, I agreed. I did, but I've found better elsewhere. I left his office feeling lighter. That chapter was closed now, not with screaming or vengeance, but with quiet dignity. I'd faced the place that had cast me out and shown them I'd survived anyway. Aurelio was waiting in the car. How did it feel? Like closing a door I should have closed years ago. I spent so long focused on what they took from me that I never saw what I found instead. And what did you find? I looked at him. This complicated, dangerous man who'd given me back my life. Purpose. Real justice. And maybe, if I'm brave enough, something more. His hand found mine. You're the bravest person I know, Serafina. Over the next 3 months, I threw myself into legitimizing Kozlov Enterprises. It was intricate, challenging work, untangling decades of questionable dealings, restructuring operations to comply with regulations, negotiating with authorities willing to overlook past issues in exchange for future cooperation. Some of Aurelio's old associates resisted. Profits would decrease if everything was above board. Operations would be constrained by regulations and oversight. But Aurelio backed every change I proposed, even when it cost him personally. This is what I want, he told his consigliere during one particularly contentious meeting. A business I don't have to hide, an empire built on legitimate success, not fear. It will take time, Victor warned, years before we're fully clean. Then we take years. We're building something that will last, not something that will collapse the moment I'm gone. I watched him during these meetings, seeing the leader he was becoming. Still strong, still commanding, but wielding power differently. Through excellence instead of intimidation. Through strategy instead of violence. And late at night, after the business discussions ended, we talked about other things. His childhood, raised in luxury, but surrounded by danger. My early years, the daughter of a teacher who'd believed in justice and fairness. The paths that had led us both to this moment. Do you miss it? He asked one evening as we sat in his study, brandy glasses in hand. The courtroom drama? The prestige of working for a major firm? No, this is better, more real. I gestured at the contracts spread across his desk. When I draft these agreements, I know they're building something that matters, not just making rich people richer. You're transforming my entire operation. Within 5 years, Kozlov Enterprises will be completely legitimate. That's the goal, though there will always be people who remember what it was before. Let them remember. As long as my children inherit something better. He paused. If I have children. The conversation shifted into territory we'd been carefully avoiding for months. We'd grown close, emotionally, physically, but neither of us had defined what we were becoming. Aurelio. I'm in love with you, he said, the confession stark and honest. I think I have been since you pointed out that trap in my contract. You saw what no one else did. You fought when you had every reason to hide. You made me want to be better. My heart raced. This is complicated. Everything about us is complicated, but that doesn't make it wrong. He set down his glass, moving to kneel beside my chair. I'm not asking you to marry me, Serafina. I'm just asking you to consider a future where we build this together. Not just the business, but something more. A partnership in every sense. I'm afraid, I admitted. I trusted Ronaldo, and he destroyed me. I know you're not him, but the fear is reasonable, expected. I would never ask you to ignore it. His hand covered mine. But I'm asking you to trust that I see you, really see you. And what I see is someone I want beside me for the rest of my life, however long that takes for you to believe. I looked at this man who'd given me back my name, my career, my sense of purpose, who challenged me intellectually, protected me fiercely, and respected my independence even when it would be easier to control. I'm in love with you too, I whispered. I think I have been for longer than I wanted to admit. His kiss was tender, reverent. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine. Then we'll take it slow. Build trust the way we're building the business, carefully, methodically, with nothing hidden. I'd like that. We sat together in comfortable silence, planning our future the way we planned corporate restructurings, with vision, patience, and absolute commitment to seeing it through. The call from Victor came at 2 a.m. 3 weeks later. I was in my own apartment. I'd maintained it as a symbol of independence, though I spent most nights at the mansion. Aurelio's name appeared on my phone screen. There's a problem, he said without preamble. The Volpe family, they've discovered who was really behind the Martinelli trap. My blood ran cold. How? Someone talked. We're still finding out who. But they know about you, about your role in dismantling their scheme. And Serafina, they know where you live. Where are you? 3 minutes away. Pack essentials only. You're coming to the mansion until we resolve this. He arrived with Victor and 4 security personnel. They swept my apartment efficiently, checking for devices or threats, while I threw clothes and documents into a suitcase with shaking hands. How bad is this? I asked Aurelio. Bad enough that I'm not taking chances with your safety. The Volpes don't forgive easily, and they see you as the reason their plan failed. I didn't do this alone. You're just as responsible. But I'm harder to reach. You're more vulnerable, and they know it. His jaw was tight with controlled anger. This is my fault. I should have anticipated retaliation. You protected me from Ronaldo, from the bar association, from everyone who tried to keep me down. You can't predict everything. I can protect you from this. Back at the mansion, Aurelio's security team implemented measures I'd only read about in legal thrillers. Armed guards at every entrance, surveillance monitoring every approach. Even the gardens were watched by discreet cameras hidden among the foliage. This is how you live? I asked, watching monitors in the security room display views of the property. This is how I survive, Aurelio corrected. The price of the life I inherited. For a week, nothing happened. The tension was exhausting, waiting for threats that never materialized, looking over my shoulder at every sound. I tried to work, to focus on contracts and corporate structures, but concentration came in fragments. You should have let me stay at my apartment, I told Aurelio one evening. This is no way to live. This is temporary, just until we neutralize the threat. And how do you neutralize an entire crime family's vendetta? His expression darkened. By making them understand that targeting you means war. By hitting them so hard they'll think twice about coming after anyone associated with me ever again. The violence implicit in his words should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a fierce satisfaction that someone was finally willing to fight for me. Not just in courtrooms, but in the dangerous shadows where real power operated. The attack came on the 8th night. I was working late in my office when alarms began shrieking through the mansion. Aurelio appeared seconds later, gun in hand, Victor and Dimitri flanking him. "Stay here," Aurelio commanded. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Before I could argue, they were gone. I heard shouts, crashes, then the sharp crack of gunfire. My legal training screamed that I should call the police. My survival instinct whispered that in Aurelio's world, police were not the solution. I locked the door and pressed myself against the wall, away from windows, waiting with my phone in hand and my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence after the chaos was somehow worse than the noise. I had no way to know what had happened, who'd won, whether Aurelio was hurt or worse. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably 15 minutes, a knock at the door. "Serafina, it's me. Open up." I recognized Aurelio's voice, but caution made me hesitate. "Tell me something only you would know." A pause. "You have a scar on your left shoulder from when you tried to learn ice skating at 12. You told me about it the night we stayed up planning the Martinelli countertrap." I opened the door. Aurelio stood there, whole and unharmed, though his shirt was torn and there was blood on his hands. Not his, I realized with relief. "Is it over?" "For now. We captured 2 of them. The others fled." His expression was grim. "This won't end until we end it." "Meaning?" "Meaning I'm going to make the Volpe family understand that you're untouchable. That anyone who threatens you answers to me directly. Aurelio, don't start a war over me. This war started the moment they tried to destroy my business. You just gave me the tools to win it." He pulled me close, his embrace fierce. "I won't lose you, Serafina. Not to them. Not to anyone." In his arms, I felt the full weight of what loving him meant. The protection, yes, but also the danger. The power he wielded and the enemies it created. The reality that his world would always carry risks that legal agreements couldn't mitigate. What do we do now? Now we eliminate the threat permanently, and you help me do it the smart way. Legally, strategically, so thoroughly that the Volpes won't dare come after us again. I pulled back to look at him. "You want me to help you destroy a crime family?" "I want you to help me dismantle their financial infrastructure until there's nothing left to fight with. Cut their money supplies, expose their shell companies, make their legitimate fronts so radioactive that no one will do business with them. You've been restructuring my operations for months. Now apply that same expertise in reverse." It should have horrified me. Instead, I felt that fierce satisfaction again. The chance to use my legal skills not just defensively, but as a weapon against people who threatened everything I was building. "All right," I said. "Show me everything you have on the Volpe family's operations. Every business, every asset, every legal vulnerability. We're going to take them apart piece by piece." Aurelio's smile was cold, dangerous. "That's my counselor." Over the next month, I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I built a legal case against the Volpe family's financial network that was so comprehensive, so meticulously documented, that when I finally presented it to federal prosecutors, they had everything they needed for a major racketeering indictment. The arrests came like dominoes. Shell company operators, money launderers, the lawyers and accountants who'd enabled it all. And finally, the Volpe patriarch himself, taken into custody while having breakfast in his favorite restaurant. "It's done," Victor reported as we watched news coverage of the arrests. "The family is destroyed. Their financial network is dismantled. The few members who weren't indicted are scrambling to distance themselves from the wreckage." "And the threat to Serafina?" Aurelio asked. "Gone. With the leadership in custody and assets seized, there's no organization left to sustain a vendetta. She's safe." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt exhausted. The past month had required me to use my legal skills in ways I'd never imagined, not to seek justice in courtrooms, but to systematically destroy an organization. Legally, yes, but destruction nonetheless. "Are you all right?" Aurelio asked after Victor left. "I'm not sure. I just helped send dozens of people to prison." Dozens of criminals who tried to kill you, who've terrorized this city for generations. I know, but it still feels wrong. Like I've crossed a line I can't uncross. Aurelio moved to stand beside me at the window overlooking the gardens. You used the law exactly as it was meant to be used. To stop criminals. To protect innocents. There's no shame in that. But I did it for revenge, not justice. You did it for survival. There's a difference. His hand found mine. Serafina, you're not Ronaldo. You didn't destroy innocent people to protect yourself. You dismantled a criminal organization that had been operating with impunity for decades. That's not wrong. It's exactly right. I wanted to believe him. And mostly, I did. But the line between using law as a shield and using it as a weapon felt thinner than I'd ever imagined. What happens now? I asked. With the Volpes gone, with your operations legitimized, what's our purpose? Aurelio turned to face me fully. Our purpose is whatever we choose it to be. We build the business we want. We help people who need second chances. We make something better than what we inherited. And us? What are we? We're whatever you want us to be. Partners, lovers, friends, all of the above. His eyes held mine. I told you I'd wait for you to decide. That offer still stands. I thought about the past 8 months, about how this man had given me back my name, my career, my sense of purpose, about how he'd protected me, challenged me, respected me even when it would have been easier to control. I don't want to wait anymore, I said quietly. I want to build this future with you. All of it. The business, the life, everything. His kiss was deep, claiming, a seal on the promise we were making. When we parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. Then let's build it together. Starting now. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom for the first time since my reinstatement. Not as defendant, but as attorney of record in a case that had consumed the legal community's attention for weeks. The reinstatement hearing of James Morrison, an attorney who'd been disbarred 5 years ago under circumstances remarkably similar to mine. James had been framed by a senior partner at his firm. Evidence planted, witnesses coached, a bar proceeding conducted with minimal investigation. He'd lost everything: career, reputation, family. He'd been working as a paralegal when he read about my reinstatement and reached out, hoping I'd take his case. I'd spent 3 months building his defense, using every lesson I'd learned from my own experience. And today was the hearing that would determine whether he got his life back. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Chen, the bailiff announced. Judge Chen entered, no relation to Richard Chen from Marcetti and Stone, but equally formidable. She'd reviewed my briefs with what I hoped was an open mind. Ms. Romano, she began, I've read your petition on behalf of Mr. Morrison. The parallels to your own case are striking. Yes, Your Honor, which is why I'm uniquely positioned to demonstrate actual innocence and request reinstatement. For the next 2 hours, I presented evidence that would have exonerated James 5 years ago if anyone had bothered to look. Security footage, financial records, testimony from witnesses who'd been intimidated into silence. The opposing counsel, representing the Bar Association, challenged every point. But I'd learned from Aurelio how to anticipate objections, how to build cases so comprehensive that rebuttal became impossible. Your Honor, I concluded, James Morrison was destroyed by the same corrupt system that nearly destroyed me. The difference is that I had resources, protection, someone willing to fight for me. James had none of those things. He deserves the same second chance I received. Judge Chen studied me thoughtfully. This is personal for you. Yes, Your Honor, because I know exactly how it feels to lose everything you've worked for based on lies. And I know how transformative it is when someone finally believes the truth. She nodded slowly. I'll have a decision within 30 days. This hearing is adjourned. Outside the courtroom, James gripped my hand with desperate hope. Thank you for believing me, for fighting. Thank you for trusting me with your case. Whatever happens, you should be proud of surviving this long. Aurelio was waiting at the courthouse steps, his presence drawing attention as always. He'd insisted on attending, sitting in the back row throughout the hearing, a silent show of support. How did it go? He asked. Well, I think. Judge Chen seemed receptive. I took his offered arm as we walked to the car. 30 days until we know. You were brilliant in there. I've watched you work before, but seeing you in a courtroom, that's where you truly belong. Victor was waiting at the car with news that made my stomach drop. We have a situation. Ronaldo Ferretti is back in Boston. The name sent ice through my veins. What? He was supposed to stay gone. That was the agreement. Apparently he violated it. He's been seen at Marcetti & Stone's offices. And there's more. Victor's expression was grim. He's filed a motion with the Bar Association, claims you extorted him, forced him to sign a false confession, that your reinstatement was based on fabricated evidence. That's insane. We have proof. He's arguing that proof was obtained through coercion. Says Kozlov's men threatened him, forced him to lie. Victor handed me a legal document. Hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Public proceeding. I read through Ronaldo's motion, fury building with each paragraph. He was trying to destroy me again, using the same tactics. Lies wrapped in legal language, accusations designed to create doubt. He can't win this, I said. We have the security footage, the bank records, witnesses. He's betting on creating enough doubt to taint your reinstatement, Aurelio said quietly. Even if he doesn't win, the publicity could destroy your credibility, make it impossible for you to practice effectively. So what do? Aurelio's ice-blue eyes met mine. You fight back. But this time, you don't fight alone, and you don't fight quietly. You expose everything he's done in the most public way possible. How? By turning his hearing into your platform. By making sure every lawyer, every judge, every client in Boston knows exactly who Ronaldo Ferretti is and what he's done. Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared for the fight of my life. Not just gathering evidence, but building a narrative so compelling, so thoroughly documented, that Ronaldo's lies would crumble under their own weight. Victor's investigators found more victims. 3 other attorneys Ronaldo had framed or undermined over the years, all willing to testify. We obtained additional security footage showing Ronaldo accessing not just my computer, but files belonging to multiple colleagues. We traced money from his offshore accounts directly to the clients he'd stolen from. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Margaret O'Brien, the senior partner from Marcetti & Stone who'd been at the Martinelli negotiations. I knew something was wrong 4 years ago, she told me in my office 3 days before the hearing. The evidence against you was too perfect, too conveniently timed. But I was a junior partner then, afraid to speak up against Ronaldo's family connections. What changed? He tried the same thing with a young associate last month. I watched him plant documents in her files, saw the same pattern repeating. I couldn't stay silent again. Her eyes were earnest. I'll testify to everything I witnessed, both 4 years ago and recently. The hearing was held in the largest courtroom in the Suffolk County Courthouse, and it was packed. Word had spread through Boston's legal community that this would be a spectacle, a public battle between a reinstated attorney and the man who'd destroyed her career. I sat at the respondents' table with Aurelio beside me. He'd insisted on attending, wanted everyone to see his support. Victor and Dimitri sat in the front row, along with Maria from the mansion and James Morrison, whose own reinstatement had been granted 3 days earlier. Ronaldo entered with his attorney, a sharp-faced man from one of Boston's most aggressive firms. He looked confident, polished, every inch the successful lawyer he'd built himself into on the foundation of my destroyed reputation. The three-judge panel entered, Judge Chen presiding, flanked by two other senior members of the Bar Oversight Committee. This hearing, Judge Chen began, concerns allegations by attorney Ronaldo Ferretti that his previous confession regarding the 2022 disbarment of attorney Serafina Romano was obtained through coercion and threats. Mr. Ferretti, you may present your case. For the next hour, Ronaldo's attorney painted a picture of me as a vengeful woman who'd aligned herself with organized crime to destroy an innocent man. He claimed Victor's investigators had threatened Ronaldo's family, that Aurelio had used his notorious reputation to intimidate Ronaldo into signing a false confession. My client, Ronaldo's attorney concluded, was terrified for his life. He signed documents he knew to be false because he feared what Mr. Kozlov would do if he refused. This is not justice. It's extortion dressed in legal clothing. When it was my turn, I stood slowly, gathering the folders of evidence I'd prepared. Your Honors, I began. Mr. Ferretti would have you believe he's a victim, that he was forced to confess to crimes he didn't commit. Let me show you who Ronaldo Ferretti really is. I started with the security footage from 4 years ago, clear images of Ronaldo at my workstation at 2 a.m., accessing my files, uploading documents. Then the bank records showing deposits to his offshore accounts matching exactly the amount stolen from clients. This is from 2021 and 2022, I explained. Before I ever knew Aurelio Kozlov. Before I had any resources to investigate. This evidence existed all along. It was simply never examined because Mr. Ferretti's family connections ensured a rushed proceeding that accepted his accusations without question. I presented testimony from the 3 other attorneys Ronaldo had undermined, each one describing similar patterns of manipulation and fraud. Then Margaret O'Brien took the stand. I watched Mr. Ferretti plant evidence in Ms. Romano's files in late 2021, she testified, her voice steady. I saw him access her computer when she was out of the office. I knew what he was doing, and I stayed silent because I was afraid of his family's influence. That silence has haunted me for 4 years. Why come forward now? Judge Chen asked. Because I watched him do it again last month to a young associate. The same pattern, the same techniques. I couldn't let another career be destroyed by my cowardice. Ronaldo's attorney tried to discredit her, but Margaret had brought her own evidence. Emails she'd saved, documenting her suspicions, dated from 2021. Finally, I called my last witness. I'd like to call Ronaldo Ferretti to the stand. His attorney objected, but Judge Chen overruled. Mr. Ferretti has made serious allegations. He should be willing to testify under oath. Ronaldo took the stand, his confidence visibly shaken. Mr. Ferretti, I began, you claim my associates threatened you to obtain your confession. Can you describe these threats? Mr. Kozlov's men said they would hurt my family if I didn't cooperate. Did they touch you? No, but did they show you weapons? The threat was implied. So no actual threats were made. You simply assumed Mr. Kozlov would be violent because of his reputation. I pulled out a document. This is the confession you signed. It's notarized, witnessed by an independent attorney who confirmed you were signing voluntarily. Were you coerced during that signing? I was afraid. Were you physically prevented from leaving? Were you injured? Were explicit threats made in the presence of witnesses? No, but everyone knows what Kozlov is. What Mr. Kozlov is a businessman who spent the last year legitimizing his operations with my legal guidance. But let's talk about what you are. I placed a new document before him. This is a bank statement from last month, your offshore account, the same account you claimed was closed in your confession. Can you explain why there was a deposit of $50,000 2 weeks ago? Ronaldo's face went white. That's not. It's from a client trust account at Marsetti and Stone, the same young associate Ms. O'Brien mentioned. You're still stealing, Mr. Ferretti. You never stopped. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Chen gavelled for order. "Your Honors," I said, "Mr. Ferretti isn't here because he was coerced. He's here because he got caught. Again. His confession was true 4 years ago, and it's true now. The only thing that's changed is that he can no longer operate with impunity." I returned to my seat, leaving Ronaldo stammering explanations that convinced no one. After closing arguments, Judge Chen called a brief recess. When the panel returned, her expression was stern. "This panel has reviewed the evidence presented today," she began. "We find that Mr. Ferretti's allegations of coercion are without merit. His confession appears to have been voluntary and is supported by substantial independent evidence. Furthermore, the evidence of recent misconduct raises serious questions about Mr. Ferretti's fitness to practice law." She turned to Ronaldo. "Mr. Ferretti, this panel is referring your conduct to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Additionally, we are initiating disbarment proceedings based on the evidence presented today. You are hereby suspended from practice pending the outcome of those proceedings." Ronaldo stood abruptly. "You can't, she's working with criminals. Kozlov is a—" "Mr. Ferretti," Judge Chen's voice cut through his protests like ice. "You've accused Ms. Romano of impropriety while engaging in the very conduct you claim to condemn. This hearing is concluded." As the judges filed out, Ronaldo turned to me, his face contorted with rage and desperation. "You think you've won? You've destroyed yourself by associating with him. Everyone will know you're Kozlov's. Careful." Aurelio's voice was soft but deadly as he stood. "Finish that sentence, and you'll discover exactly how much influence I actually have." For a moment they faced each other. Ronaldo with his accusations and empty threats. Aurelio with the quiet certainty of someone who had nothing left to prove. Ronaldo broke first, gathering his papers and fleeing the courtroom with his attorney scrambling behind him. The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, but several attorneys approached me, some offering congratulations, others asking quietly if I was taking new clients, if I might review cases where they suspected their colleagues of similar fraud. "You've started something," Aurelio murmured as we finally made our way out of the courthouse. "Every corrupt attorney in Boston is going to be looking over their shoulder now." "Good. Maybe next time someone sees evidence being planted, they'll speak up instead of staying silent like Margaret did." We emerged into bright October sunshine. A crowd of reporters had gathered on the courthouse steps. Word of the hearing's outcome had already spread. "Ms. Romano, is it true you're working for Aurelio Kozlov? Ms. Romano, will you be pressing charges against Mr. Ferretti? Ms. Romano, how does it feel to finally clear your name?" I paused at the top of the steps, Aurelio beside me, and faced the cameras. 4 years ago, I was destroyed by a corrupt system that accepted lies without investigation, that valued connections over truth, that failed to protect an innocent attorney because it was easier than challenging someone with power. I let my voice carry across the gathered crowd. Today, that same system finally delivered justice. Not because I stayed quiet and accepted my fate, but because I fought back. Because I found people willing to stand with me. Because I refused to let lies define who I am. "What about your association with Mr. Kozlov?" a reporter called out. I felt Aurelio tense beside me, but I continued steadily. Aurelio Kozlov gave me an opportunity when no one else would. He believed me when everyone else called me a liar. He protected me when I was vulnerable. Yes, I work for Kozlov Enterprises as general counsel. And I'm proud of that work because we're building something legitimate, something that gives second chances to people who deserve them. "Are the rumors true that you're engaged?" I glanced at Aurelio, who gave me the slightest nod, permission to share what we'd kept private. "We're married," I said simply. "As of 3 months ago." The crowd erupted with questions, but I raised my hand. "One more thing. To every attorney who's been falsely accused, every person who's been destroyed by someone else's corruption, don't give up. Don't accept that your story is over. Fight back. Find your allies. Reclaim your truth, because justice delayed isn't justice denied if you refuse to stop fighting. As we descended the steps to the waiting car, I heard scattered applause from the crowd. Not everyone approved. I could see the judgment in some faces, the skepticism about my association with Aurelio. But I'd stopped caring what strangers thought about my choices. "That was quite a speech," Victor said as we settled into the car. "Very inspiring. It was the truth," I replied. "The only thing I have left to give people who are where I was 4 years ago." "Where to?" Dimitri asked from the driver's seat. Aurelio looked at me. "Home?" I thought about the penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, the space we'd made ours. But that's not where I needed to go right now. Actually, there's somewhere else I need to be first. 20 minutes later, we pulled up outside Brewer and Associates, my old firm, where Ronaldo had planted the evidence that destroyed my career. "Are you sure about this?" Aurelio asked. "I need to do this, to close this door properly." I looked at him. "Will you come with me?" "Always." Robert Brewer's assistant looked shocked when we entered. "Ms. Romano, Mr. Kozlov, I'll see if Mr. Brewer is available." "He'll make himself available," Aurelio said quietly. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. 5 minutes later, we were shown to the senior partner's office. Robert Brewer rose from behind his desk, his expression wary. "Ms. Romano, I heard about the hearing. Congratulations on your vindication." "Thank you. Though I notice you didn't fight for me when Ronaldo's fraud first came to light." He had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't know the full truth then. If I had, you would have done exactly what you did. Protected the firm's reputation, made the problem disappear as quickly as possible, and never looked back. I kept my voice even, factual. I'm not here for an apology, Mr. Brewer. I'm here to tell you that I'm taking 3 of your associates with me." His eyes widened. "Excuse me?" Margaret O'Brien, Daniel Chen, and Sarah Blackwell have all submitted their resignations effective immediately. They're joining Kozlov Enterprises' new legal division, one dedicated to representing wrongly accused attorneys and building airtight corporate structures that can withstand scrutiny. I smiled. "I believe Margaret left her resignation letter on your desk this morning." Brewer's face had gone red. "You're poaching my senior partners? I'm hiring brilliant attorneys who are tired of working for a firm that values connections over ethics. They made their own choices." I placed a business card on his desk. "We're also taking over representation of 6 of your largest clients. They called me after the hearing. Apparently, they're concerned about the ethical climate at Brewer and Associates. This is... you can't... I can, and I have. Consider it the cost of your silence 4 years ago." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Mr. Brewer, if you have associates who need a second chance, who've been wrongly accused, send them my way. Unlike you, I believe people when the evidence supports them." Outside, Aurelio was smiling. "I'm impressed. That was ruthless. I learned from the best." I took his arm. "Now can we go home? I'm exhausted." But the day had one more surprise waiting. When we arrived at the penthouse, we found Victor waiting with a folder. "This just came from the district attorney's office." I opened it to find a letter informing me that based on the evidence presented at the hearing, the DA was filing criminal charges against Ronaldo Ferretti, fraud, embezzlement, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The prosecutor wanted me to testify at trial. "There's more," Victor said. "They're also investigating his father and 2 uncles. Apparently, the family connections that protected Ronaldo all these years were built on judicial corruption. This is going to be a major scandal." I sank onto the sofa, overwhelmed. It's really over. He can't hurt me anymore. "No," Aurelio agreed, sitting beside me. "He can't, and more importantly, he can't hurt anyone else either." That night, as we stood on the penthouse balcony overlooking Boston Harbor, I finally allowed myself to feel the weight lift. 4 years of fear, of hiding, of believing I'd never reclaim who I was. All of it finally released. "What are you thinking?" Aurelio asked, his arm around my waist. "That I'm ready to stop looking backward, to really build the future we've been planning. The legal division is just the beginning. What else do you want to build?" I turned to face him. "A family. Not right away. I want to establish the practice first, help more people like James. But in a year or two, when Kozlov Enterprises is completely legitimate, when we can give children a life without looking over our shoulders." "Yes," he said simply, "to all of it. Whatever timeline you want, whatever you need. Yes." His certainty, his absolute commitment to building the life I envisioned, still had the power to make my heart race. "I love you," I said. "Not for what you've given me, but for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing me when everyone else called me a liar, for fighting with me instead of for me. I love you because you pointed at a contract and saved my empire, because you faced down your nightmare with courage I've rarely seen, because you turned destruction into purpose and made me want to be better than what I inherited." We kissed as the sun set over Boston Harbor, the city lights beginning to twinkle like promises of the future we'd build together. 18 months later, the new offices of Romano Legal Services occupied the entire 15th floor of a building in Boston's financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city I'd once fled, the city I'd reclaimed. "Ms. Romano?" My assistant, a young woman who'd been wrongly accused of plagiarism in law school and whom I'd helped exonerate, poked her head into my office. "Your 3 o'clock is here, and Mr. Kozlov called to confirm dinner at 7. "Thank you, Rachel." I glanced at my calendar. My 3 o'clock was the attorney from New York, disbarred 2 years ago under suspicious circumstances. Our firm had taken 43 cases in the past 18 months. We'd won reinstatement for 31 so far. But before I could call Rachel back to show the client in, Aurelio appeared in my doorway. "You're early," I said, smiling. "I wanted to see you before you got caught up in the afternoon." He crossed to my desk, and I noticed he was carrying a small box. "I have something for you." "Aurelio, I told you I don't need gifts." "This isn't a gift. It's a completion." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold plaque, engraved with words that made my throat tight. "Serafina Romano, Attorney at Law Reinstated 2025. Justice delayed is not justice denied. For your office," he explained. "So every client who walks through that door knows they're working with someone who understands their fight." I stood, moving around the desk to wrap my arms around him. "It's perfect. You're perfect. I'm many things, but perfect isn't one of them." His hands settled on my waist, and I felt him tense slightly. "Serafina, there's something else. Something I need to tell you." The seriousness in his tone made me pull back to look at him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything is. Complete." He took a breath. "As of this morning, the final restructuring is done. Every business, every operation, every contract, all of it legitimate, all of it clean. Kozlov Enterprises is 100% legal." I stared at him, not quite believing. "You're sure? Everything?" "Victor confirmed it an hour ago. We're done. The transformation is complete." Joy and relief flooded through me. This was what we'd been working toward for 2 years. What had seemed impossible when I'd first pointed at that contract in his dining room. This means our children will inherit something we can be proud of, something built on excellence instead of fear. His hands moved to cradle my face. "This means I kept my promise to you, to become someone better than what my father left me. You've always been better than that. You just needed the chance to prove it." I kissed him softly. "And now you have." Now we both have. His hand moved from my face to rest gently on my stomach, where the smallest curve had just begun to show. All three of us. I'd discovered the pregnancy 2 weeks ago. We'd been planning to wait, but sometimes life had its own timeline. And looking at Aurelio's face, the joy, the wonder, the absolute certainty, I knew this was exactly right. "What do you think?" I asked. "Ready to be a father in a completely legitimate empire?" "Ready to be a father to your child? Always. Everything else is just details." He pulled me close, his arms protective around me. "Thank you." For what? For seeing the trap, for saving me, for believing I could be better and helping me become it. His voice was rough with emotion. For giving me everything I never knew I needed. "You gave me my life back first. I'd say we're even." We stood there in my office, two people who'd been broken by different circumstances, who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the pieces. 3 years later. The courtroom was packed again, but this time I wasn't the one on trial or defending a client. I was simply an observer, watching as Ronaldo Ferretti stood before a judge to receive his sentence. The trial had lasted 6 weeks. The evidence of his fraud, his evidence tampering, his systematic destruction of multiple careers, had been overwhelming. His father and uncles had already been sentenced for their role in the judicial corruption that had enabled him for years. "Mr. Ferretti," the judge began, "you exploited your position of trust to destroy innocent people's careers while enriching yourself. You corrupted the legal system that you'd sworn to uphold. You showed no remorse, no acceptance of responsibility, even when confronted with irrefutable evidence." Ronaldo stood silent, his expensive suit unable to disguise the defeat in his posture. "I hereby sentence you to 15 years in federal prison, to be followed by 5 years of supervised release. Additionally, you are permanently disbarred and prohibited from working in any legal capacity upon your release." 15 years. Longer than the 4 years he'd stolen from me, but still somehow not enough to balance the scales of what he'd done to so many people. As the bailiffs led Ronaldo away, he looked back one final time. Our eyes met across the courtroom. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no vindication. Just a quiet sense of completion. This chapter was finally, truly closed. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered, many of them attorneys I'd helped over the past 3 years, others who'd been Ronaldo's victims, and who'd finally seen justice served. "Ms. Romano," a reporter called. "How does it feel to see Ronaldo Ferretti sentenced?" I paused on the courthouse steps, remembering the last time I'd stood here, newly vindicated but still fighting. Now I stood here complete, whole, with nothing left to prove. "It feels like justice," I said simply. "Not just for me, but for everyone whose careers he destroyed, whose lives he shattered. This verdict says that no one, no matter their connections, no matter their power, is above accountability." Will you continue representing wrongly accused attorneys? Absolutely. For as long as there are people who need second chances, Romano Legal Services will be here to fight for them. And your family? There are rumors. I smiled, my hand moving instinctively to rest on the slight curve where my daughter was growing. 3 months along now, a sister for our son Lucas, who was currently home with his father and probably making a mess of Aurelio's impeccably organized office. My family is perfect. My husband supports this work completely. We're building something better, a legacy of justice and second chances that our children can be proud of. As the reporters shouted more questions, Aurelio appeared beside me, Lucas balanced on his hip. Our 2-year-old son had his father's dark hair and my hazel eyes, and he'd somehow convinced Aurelio to let him wear his favorite dinosaur shirt to the courthouse. "Mama!" Lucas reached for me, and I took him, savoring the solid weight of him in my arms. How did he do? I asked Aurelio. Perfect. Only climbed on my desk twice and reorganized exactly one drawer of legal files by color. Aurelio's expression was soft as he looked at our son. Victor says the damage is minimal. I helped, Lucas announced proudly. You absolutely did. I kissed the top of his head, then looked at Aurelio. Ready to go home? Always. As we walked to the car, I reflected on how far we'd traveled from that night in his dining room. Aurelio had transformed his empire into a completely legitimate corporation. Kozlov Enterprises was now known for innovation and integrity, frequently featured in business journals as a model for ethical corporate structure. The old ghosts of his father's violence had been exorcised, replaced by a reputation built on excellence. My own practice had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. 43 cases had become 200. I'd trained a team of attorneys who specialized in wrongful disbarments and helped establish new oversight protocols at the Bar Association to prevent cases like mine from happening again. But more than professional success, we'd built a life, a real family. Sunday mornings with Lucas, helping us make pancakes. Evenings on the penthouse balcony, watching the harbor lights while planning our future. Quiet moments late at night when Aurelio would rest his hand on my growing belly and tell our daughter about the world we were building for her. What are you thinking? Aurelio asked as Dmitri drove us home. That I'm grateful for all of it, even the painful parts, because they led me here, to this, to you, to our family. He took my hand, lifting it to his lips. 4 years ago, you pointed at a contract and changed both our lives. You changed mine first, by believing me when no one else did. We saved each other, he said simply. And then we built something better than either of us could have built alone. Lucas had fallen asleep against my shoulder, his small hand clutching my shirt. I looked at Aurelio, at our sleeping son, at the life we'd created from the wreckage of who we'd been before. I love our life, I said. Everything about it. The practice, the family, waking up next to you every morning, knowing we built all of this together. So do I, though I especially love watching you in court. You're magnificent when you're fighting for justice. And you're magnificent when you're being a father. You know, Lucas told me yesterday that he wants to be a lawyer like Mama and a businessman who helps people like Papa. Aurelio's eyes softened. Does he now? He does. Though he also wants to be a dinosaur, so we should probably wait a few years before we start planning his career path. We laughed together, the sound filling the car with warmth. 5 years later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new Romano Legal Services office in New York was attended by over 300 people, clients past and present, attorneys we'd trained, judges who'd presided over our reinstatement cases, and representatives from bar associations across the country who were implementing the oversight reforms we'd championed. I stood at the podium, 7 months pregnant with our third child, with Aurelio beside me and our children in the front row. Lucas, now 7, and Amelia, 4, both wearing their best clothes and trying very hard to sit still. 8 years ago, I began. I was a disgraced attorney working as a cook, hiding from the world, convinced my life was over. Today, I stand here as the founder of a practice that's helped 743 attorneys reclaim their careers and their dignity. I paused, looking at the faces in the crowd, so many of them people whose lives had intersected with mine through shared struggles and victories. But this work was never about me. It was about proving that the system could do better, that second chances matter, that truth and justice are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible. My gaze found Aurelio, who was watching me with the same intensity he'd had that night I'd pointed at his contract. Except now it was tempered with love, with partnership, with the shared knowledge of everything we'd built together. Someone once told me that we're never truly destroyed unless we choose to stay broken, that the pieces we're left with can build something even better than what we had before. I've spent 8 years proving that truth, not just for myself, but for every person who walks through our doors believing their story is over. I rested my hand on my belly, where our son, we'd learned last week it was a boy, kicked against my palm as if affirming my words. This new office represents our commitment to expanding that work, to making sure that from New York to Boston to every city where injustice happens, there are people willing to fight back, to stand up for truth, to refuse to let corruption win. The applause was thunderous. As I cut the ribbon officially opening the new office, I felt Aurelio's hand at the small of my back, his constant support, his steady presence. Later, after the ceremony, after the reception, after we'd tucked Lucas and Amelia into bed in our hotel suite, Aurelio and I stood at the window overlooking Central Park. "You were amazing today," he said, his arms around me from behind, his hands resting on my swollen belly. "Though you really should be resting more. You're 7 months pregnant and expanding a multi-state legal practice." "I'm fine, strong as ever. Besides, someone once told me that courage means being afraid and doing it anyway." That someone was wise. I turned in his arms to face him. That someone gave me back my life and then helped me build something better than I'd ever imagined possible. We built it together. Your vision, my resources, our combined determination to create something that matters. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked. The old life, the power that came from fear instead of excellence. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. No committees, no oversight, no need to justify every decision. But then I come home to you and our children, to a life built on something sustainable and true, and I know I'd never go back. What we have now is better in every way that matters. Even though it's harder, even though you had to completely transform everything your father left you. Especially because of that. My father's empire was built on violence and fear. It would have destroyed my children the way it nearly destroyed me. What we've built, legitimate businesses, ethical practices, a reputation for integrity, that's something they can inherit without shame." I stood on my toes to kiss him. "You're a good man, Aurelio Kozlov. Even better than I knew that first night when you demanded to know what I'd seen in your contract. And you're extraordinary, Serafina Romano. Though I knew that the moment you were brave enough to speak up." His hands moved to cradle my face. "Thank you for saving me first, for pointing at that contract and changing everything. Thank you for believing me, for fighting for me, for helping me become someone who could save myself." We stood there in our hotel room, two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of destruction, who'd built an empire of second chances from the pieces of their broken lives. 10 years later, I stood in the Supreme Court of Massachusetts, waiting to be sworn in as the newest Associate Justice. The nomination had been unexpected. I'd been content building Romano Legal Services, which now had offices in 12 states and had helped over 3,000 attorneys reclaim their licenses. But when the governor had called, explaining that they needed someone on the bench who understood what it meant to be failed by the system, someone who would fight for justice even when it was inconvenient, I couldn't say no. Aurelio sat in the front row with our children. Lucas, 17 and already talking about law school. Amelia, 14 and fiercely determined to follow in her father's business footsteps. Marcus, 10 and still deciding between being a paleontologist or a civil rights attorney. And our youngest, Sophia, 7, who wanted to do everything Mama and Papa do, but better. "Raise your right hand," the Chief Justice instructed. I raised my hand, feeling the weight of the moment. 18 years ago, I'd been disbarred in disgrace. Now I was about to join the highest court in the Commonwealth. "Do you solemnly swear to administer justice without respect to persons, and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as Associate Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court under the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So help you God? I do. The courtroom erupted in applause. I saw tears streaming down Aurelio's face. This man who'd once commanded an empire through fear now weeping openly at his wife's achievement. After the ceremony, after the congratulations and the photographs, we gathered as a family in the courthouse's private chambers. "Mama's a Supreme Court justice," Sophia said, trying out the words. "That's the biggest judge, right?" "One of them," I corrected, pulling her onto my lap. "There are 9 of us, and we work together to make sure laws are fair and just. Like how you helped all those lawyers who got blamed for things they didn't do? Exactly like that, except now I can help make sure those things don't happen in the first place." Lucas, who'd been studying constitutional law in his advanced classes, had questions about judicial philosophy and precedent. Emilia wanted to know how this would affect the family businesses. She'd been working part-time at Kozloff Enterprises and had a strategic mind that rivaled her father's. Marcus asked if I'd ever rule on cases involving dinosaurs, and we all laughed. Later, when the children were distracted by their cousins, Victor's daughter had brought her new baby, and they were all cooing over her. Aurelio pulled me aside. "Justice Romano," he said, testing out my new title. "It suits you. I prefer it when you call me Serafina." "Serafina," he repeated, his voice soft. "My brilliant wife, mother of my children, savior of my soul, and now Supreme Court Justice. Have I told you lately that you're remarkable?" "You tell me every day, but I never get tired of hearing it." He took my hands in his. 18 years ago, you walked into my dining room to serve me dinner, and you saw a trap that would have destroyed everything I'd built. You spoke up when you had every reason to stay silent. You trusted me when you had every reason to be afraid. And you changed both our lives completely. You changed mine first, by giving me the chance to be who I really was, instead of who circumstances had forced me to become. "We saved each other," he said, repeating words that had become our truth. "And then we built something extraordinary." I looked around the room, at our children, healthy and happy and free from the shadows that had haunted both Aurelio's childhood and my young adulthood. At Victor, who'd become family, whose loyalty had never wavered. At the attorneys I'd mentored who'd come to celebrate this moment. At the judges and politicians and community leaders who'd learned to respect the name Romano not for scandal, but for justice. "Do you ever think about that night?" I asked Aurelio. "About what would have happened if I'd stayed silent, if I'd just served your dinner and walked away?" "Every day. I think about how close I came to signing that contract, to losing everything. How close I came to never really knowing you." His arms wrapped around me. "I think about all the moments that had to align perfectly. You needing a job, my house needing a cook, that specific contract arriving on that specific night when you happened to see it." "Fate," I said. "Justice," he corrected. "The universe's way of balancing scales. You deserved better than what Ronaldo did to you. I deserved better than what my father left me. And somehow, we found each other and made those better futures real." As the reception continued around us, I let myself feel the full measure of what we'd accomplished. Not just professionally, the successful practice, the reformed Bar Association procedures, the judicial appointment that would let me protect others the way I'd been protected. But personally, a family built on love and truth, children who would inherit a legacy of integrity, a marriage between two people who'd learned that strength isn't about controlling others, but about building with them. "Do you know what I'm most proud of?" I asked Aurelio. "Tell me." "That our children will never know what it feels like to be powerless. That they're growing up believing justice is possible, that second chances exist, that people can transform themselves completely if they're willing to do the work." Because they watched us do exactly that. Because we did it together. You transformed your empire. I reclaimed my career. And together we built a family and a legacy that proves broken things can become beautiful. Aurelio kissed me softly. Justice Romano, you are my greatest achievement and my deepest joy. Everything else we've built, the businesses, the practice, the reputation, all of it pales beside what we created together. We created second chances, I said, for ourselves and for thousands of others. We created hope, he added, the belief that being destroyed isn't the end of the story. As the sun set over Boston, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, I stood in my husband's arms, surrounded by the family we'd built and the legacy we'd created. And I knew with absolute certainty, this was what victory looked like. Not a moment, but a lifetime. Not perfection, but transformation. Not the absence of struggle, but the triumph that comes from refusing to let struggle define you. 18 years ago, I'd pointed at a line in a contract and saved a stranger's empire. He'd believed me and given me back my life. Together, we'd built something better than either of us could have imagined alone. And that was justice. True, complete, and absolutely worth fighting for. Hello, dear. If this story touched your heart in any way, please leave a like. It helps me keep bringing more stories to you. And if you know someone who would love this tale, share it. Every story here at Emma Romance Library is crafted with love, thinking of you. See you in the next story. Sending love.